OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, it's bang on 7:30. It's Tuesday morning. The band is back together. Owen, good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, Ger. How are things?
I'm good. You're a little bit croaky there. Is this the hangover from Sunday?
People always say this to me that I'm croaky as if it's like not 7:30 in the morning.
No, that's not it. There are days when there's like a normal timbre to your voice where you're rested, well slept, the muscle relaxing, the pre-show routine has been done in full. And then there's other mornings where you're like,
I just didn't do the pre-show routine, obviously. Then,
yeah, or you were gallivanting around town.
I could just do it. I could just do it on air. I could just go through the various keys or whatever it is.
Having the crack.
Yeah.
How was Fairview Park?
Good venue.
Is it?
Can you hear it from your house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're even closer to me. I think I could hear it from my house from last week. So, better just go and be there rather than just listen to it from your house, right?
Because I was lying in bed last night going, it was here. It's like, whereas, and then checking, and you're on Instagram going, that's the difference in our life at this point.
Did you think of picking up the phone and or writing an angry worded email or anything like that last night?
No. Although he did joke, it was like, we were all like, this is going to be great. It's going to be the concerts, and then it actually happened. You're like,
you're almost there.
It's going to finish.
It's over now, is it, or is there
1st of July? I think. It's
they're still going. Yeah.
Finishing with the Stereophonics on Friday night.
Oh yes, of course. You'll be there. Wayne Rooney, maybe.
The Stereophonics once did a gig in Whelan, and a friend of ours was organising it, and she invited us all, and one of my friends rewarded this generosity by booing the Stereophonics loudly for a large part of the set.
And I'm sure they deserved it.
I don't know.
I think they did.
I mean, but if you fair enough, but
stay true to yourself on an artistic level.
Don't go.
Take the free tickets and boo the band. I like that, honestly.
I mean, it was outrageous.
I will be standing outside Fairview Park booing Stereophonics on Friday night.
You hate them
with a sign.
Why were they untrue to their? I mean, are they not exactly who they should be?
No, I mean,
you just think they're crap.
No, yeah, I do think they're crap, but I think that your friend staying true to themselves and actually booing an artist they don't like is
fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's consistency.
Are you having a good morning though, Owen? Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you drinking there? Oh, you're enjoying your flat white, are you? The last bit of coffee that the coffee machine gave out this morning.
Oh, okay.
That I was queuing up for, and then I went and I was like, suddenly it's broken. You seem to have broken the entire coffee machine. So it's going to be a very lackluster show this morning, folks. I just want to warn you in advance that there's going to be a good solid 3.5 out of 10 from the show today. Certainly from my part of the show. Oh, and I suspect will be, given last night and the coffee, probably round out about 5. So between us, we might just scrape a pass.
Yeah, no, happy days. As long as I got sorted from the coffee machine, that is all that matters.
Yeah, life is good. I also got dressed in the dark, as maybe you don't know this, but it was very early, and I put on this shirt, and then I realised that there was a button missing, and I was like, why do you keep a shirt with a button missing without fixing it?
Yeah.
That's just bad.
No, it's a belly out day.
And and then I had to put on a hoodie, so now I'm sweating as well. It's been the worst morning so far, and I forgot my lunch. But anyway,
and also I think, I don't want to completely take this down a dark path, but I think the mornings have drawn in already. This morning was a dark morning. I was like, are we already in September? So happy Tuesday, everybody.
Feels like it's been kind of September-ish.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it doesn't. It feels like it's more November-ish.
Yeah, it does. So we're just bringing you all the bright-eyed kind of storylines this morning.
I have a theory though, that because we've had a shit June, we're going to have a great October and November, and we'll all forget about the bad summer that we're having, and we're going to have a great winter. Okay,
well, I hope your theory proves to be correct. I mean, there's we've had good Octobers, Novembers recently, haven't we?
We have, yeah. They've been sensational. Everybody kind of forgets about it. Or they're like, global warming's not going to be too bad for Ireland. Then it's like, actually, it's really we're going to end up underwater. So maybe we should, quit with the laughing, or maybe it's just,
or even worse, move to the Midlands.
I mean, no one's going to do that.
No,
people are leaving it. Fergus Keogh says, Jesus, Ger, first world problems. Indeed, yeah, indeed, it is. I mean, Fergus, if you missed it, newsflash, we do live in the first world. We talk about sport for 2.5 hours every morning. I mean, is that not a general first world thing that we have the privilege to do so, and we should get on with it? I'm being told to get on with it. James Horan resigned late last night.
He did.
I kind of think we predicted this on the show yesterday in a way. Some people were like, no, I think he's going to be okay. I kind of felt like that was the end of the road, that it felt like it was the end of the road. And was it Anthony Moyes said he looked tired in the sideline yesterday? We've done a bit of work with James Horan in the past, and I've always found him to be a brilliant fella and a deep thinker of the game. And I think people forget where Mayo football was before James Horan took over. They were they were cannon fodder in the qualifiers for mediocre teams. They'd reached rock bottom, and he came in and completely professionalised it and ended almost all of the carnival that surrounded and the circus that surrounded Mayo football. But even he couldn't hold back or stem the tide of the carnival that follows Mayo football. So I wish whoever comes next very well, and I hope they give it to Andy Moran, and that they get the dream team of Moran and Solon in, because Solon was very close to getting it the last time, and they're working together at the moment with Leitrim, and fair play to Leitrim, etc. But this is the moment.
It does feel like it, and like the issue you might just have is like, are Mayo going to give it to somebody who's done 1 year of intercounty management? Like, it seems that it's a perfect time to take that sort of a gamble, because it's a weighted gamble. You know that it's somebody who's hugely respected in that dressing room, who's played at an extremely high level, and his first year at Leitrim has been really impressive. So it would make sense from Mayo's perspective. It just feels out of kilter with an intercounty management appointment, sort of. To go that way, you kind of feel that he has to do like another couple of years before he can get appointed to the Mayo role. But why not now? I think with regards to Horan, I think the second stint is really interesting. I thought he kind of came back almost as, not as a new man, but certainly he kind of came at quelling the expectation and the circus around Mayo in a different way. I definitely felt that there was kind of more of a high performance aspect to his second stint as Mayo manager, just in terms of what he had done in terms of going into other sporting organisations, trying to be a bit of a sponge to learn from other teams and what they tried to do, and trying to bring that to the pitch for Mayo. And last year is when it felt that it reached that point where they might almost get over the line. And I think maybe as time goes by, 2021 could actually be the one that stings the most for Mayo people, just given how well they were set up and what a job they did, and potentially the Tyrone team that they had in that final. Of course, the non-Horan years of 16 and 17 might sting a little bit more, but 2021 was a hell of a chance, and they came so close.
It was. And you think of the missed penalty now, and everything kind of becomes more codified. Like that was the hinge point of an entire era, really. Because I don't know, I actually still think that Tyrone team are going to come back next year and remind us all that they're a very, very good team. That they have forwards, they have defenders, they have midfielders. Like they're actually a complete team.
Keepers in the country.
They're a complete team. They just had a down season. They obviously couldn't get back to the emotional pitch that's required, having climbed the mountain. Now, here's the thing. Maybe some generations of players are going to be different, and they're going to do that once, and they're going to be like, I had that done, I ain't doing that again. Listening to Paul Mannion recently talking with Joe, it does not sound like he's coming back, and it sounds like the drain and the bubble that you need to live in was so intense that actually it's not sustainable. And so maybe it's not sustainable for that group, I don't know, but I suspect that they will come back. And I think that what they're seeing with Derry is going to inspire them to come back. And even what they saw with Armagh, it's right there for Tyrone to win another All-Ireland at the moment. Dublin are not that far ahead, Kerry are not that far ahead, and they had Kerry's number in an epic game. So maybe that retrospectively will ease a bit of the pain that Mayo are feeling. But I see various people saying, the era is not over, but it is. It's absolutely, it's a new era now. Like that new team that comes through has to be led by players who aren't stalwarts. If they're going to get over the line, it's not going to be them being dragged over the line by Cillian O'Connor. And even is Diarmuid O'Connor going to be an All-Ireland winning line dragger? He's not. He's going to be part of a cast of players who does it.
Yeah, it felt that new generation kind of came through last year, and Horan, when he took over in 2019, was looking after a team that was very different to the team that beat Dublin last year, for example. So I think that the new generation has been brought through, and I think we're seeing the early signs of it. It's just about who are the leaders and at what point does it become their team, as opposed to the contributing factors in Aidan O'Shea's and Cillian O'Connor's team. And that's obviously the other question that gets asked after a result like Sunday. It's not just about James Horan, and we've got the answer to that question. It's also around the likes of O'Connor and O'Shea, and do they hang around? But it feels like those questions have been asked for years, and you probably suggest that those players do hang around for a new coach, don't they? That you've got the change now. Something needed to give, you'd have thought, after the performance on Sunday, and you've got a managerial change. So it's just going to be really interesting to see what they do with some of those players who are hanging around, because Killian's not had a good season, but he's been injured. In fairness, he's struggled with an injury, I'd say. And Aidan O'Shea's been hit and miss in some of the big games. So what do you do? What, like, when you're trying to channel two of your the biggest reputations in that dressing room, how do you utilise them? I think that those are the biggest questions that they need to come up with answers for next season. With regards to other people of a similar age, like you're looking at someone like Lee Keegan, who is absolutely magnificent again at the back. Like there's a lot of good things to work with there. It's a great job to get if you can handle the mad circus bit, as you mentioned.
The mad circus bit is like off the charts. It is. So you are very close to the Kerry rumour mill, and you understand how mad that rumour mill is.
Last week was crazy. Last week was the craziest rumour week of all time. But Mayo's on a different level.
How much of it ended up being true?
A lot of it. A lot of it ended up being true.
It got to the point where
that David Clifford had monkeypox.
Isn't it Joe Kennedy who had the thing about when the shoeshine boy is giving you stock tips, then's the time to sell? So he survived the great Wall Street crash of the 20s. My history here is pretty limited.
Yeah.
And that was how it happened. Like he's like, "Get a shoe shine." And your man's like, "Oh, you should buy the stock." And he's like, "Oh, get the hell out of here!"
Right?
Yeah. It was like that with the Kerry rumours when your dad was giving you information.
And I mean, he was like,
it was the first time in recorded life that you're getting a WhatsApp from your dad, like inside information.
Inside information. I have,
and it was correct.
I have good information that David Clifford is good to go. And in fairness, the Clifford stuff was wild. But then there was also kind of like stuff around, Kerry's midfield being threadbare, Jack Barry not playing was information that we got early in the week, and a lot of it ended up being true.
And that's the wildness in Kerry. In Mayo, it's times a million that.
Yeah.
Because, like, at least in Kerry, there's lads with All-Ireland medals rattling around the place. They have some kind of sense of, well, this will turn. The world will turn. We know exactly what's going to happen. In Mayo, they don't have that sense. There's just the wildness. And it's like into the infinite void of the curse. Like, people talk about the curse now as a real thing. We started joking about it. But now you're kind of like, what is the curse? Is the curse the inability to kick the ball straight from 13 metres and kick it over the bar? Like it's the forwards are cursed. It's not that like a priest cursed them. It's just that like they can't kick points, and that's devastating to a team, and it's devastating to a culture when it's part of you, and you're like, how do you fix that? I don't know how you fix that.
It wasn't much of a travelling circus this year, I felt. Like, I know that the game came after an all-time classic on Sunday, but it did feel like that there wasn't even a sense of expectation in the ground. That goes for both sets of fans. Like, I mean, Kerry fans didn't travel very well, but you didn't have that circus around the Mayo team on Sunday. Like, even Malachy Clerkin wrote a good piece on Saturday morning, I think it was, just about how they're kind of at the end of their tether now, this Mayo set of supporters, which was a piece basically which was calling that Mayo were going to get beaten on Sunday. And I was like, interesting, because I wasn't 100% sure that they were going to lose, but he was spot on in the end, and it kind of did feel like that. It was kind of like, well, this is...
You were a bit close to it, but like it finished out, it was a paddling. They took a paddling, and it was always a paddling from the bit where they never had the belief that they could win. Like McLaughlin's miss is like, again, kind of this totemic moment where that's it, boiled down. The chance is right there. It's your moment. You can do it. And then you don't do it and you get blown out because you can't do it. Johnny Moylan says, Horan seems like a good guy, but he's getting too much credit generally. This was his third chance. He should have been gone after last year's debacle against Tyrone, where they lost the All-Ireland final. I mean, is it a debacle to lose in an All-Ireland final, having beaten the 6th time in a row All-Ireland champions to get there after an epic game? I don't think that's fair. It's also not his third chance, it's his second chance, and I think he was entitled to come back. He did really well with the team when he came back, got to 2 All-Ireland finals, but that's it. Shane says, lads, it's too early for Andy Moran, zero experience and is too close to some of the players, so stop the Moran hype train before it leaves the station. Rommel says, Moran has no experience. If it's an internal appointment, Rochford is the guy and doesn't have a juggernaut to face this time around. I doubt maybe Rochford is a candidate, and he certainly, if he wants it, he should be entitled to go for it, because he did an excellent job. The no experience thing is like nonsense. He has just done a full year of intercounty management. He knows what it means to manage a team in intercounty football. It is, what more can you do? Like, do you want 10 years intercounty management experience? It doesn't matter. Like, we've seen in loads of sports, particularly in GAA, that this isn't a full-time gig, as in you don't have to go through and do your coaching badges. There is no UEFA Pro license here. Like, if you understand how the county game is going and you understand what the resources are and you can make sure that you have enough money to pay the backroom staff that you need, then you can win All-Irelands early in your managerial career.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know it's not comparing like with like because they went through the underage system, but even the Tyrone managerial team, like just Dooher's getting over the line last year maybe is an example that it can be done pretty early. Again, I know that Andy Moran's only done 1 year of management. Also, the situation is that if you're waiting for someone like Andy Moran to be ready, you might start judging him on Leitrim's results. And just given the size of the county and their expectations, like they could lose every game in a championship season.
He could do an amazing job.
And yeah, he could have done a great job. You just don't know. So that's a really tricky one. Like how like the Mayo County Board need to go on some sort of fact-finding mission to find out like how good this guy is, because like, I mean, the credentials and as a Mayo man and as a Mayo legend are not to be questioned, and within the dressing room he'd be hugely respected. But actually going and finding out what sort of job has he done so far at Leitrim is a difficult enough task. But like the Mayo County Board now basically need to just do their homework and ensure that fact-finding mission does happen. Like, so the Mayo people, their future happiness is in the hands of the county board, ensuring that they do make sure that it's a thorough search to find Horan's successor.
Philip Nolan says Mayo need a complete reset. I'm two minds about that. Like, they've, as you say, it's a good job. You know, there's still plenty of talent around. It's whether or not they're able to make the commitment again and go on the road again to try and win this thing that they have given their entire life to try and win. So, and Dave Cos says Christ himself could take the Mayo job and their forwards would still kick wides. Maybe they'd be hitting the crossbar. 7:46 OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Sue Ronan is going to join us in a few moments. Matt Williams and Gregor Paul are going to preview Ireland against New Zealand, or the All Blacks, as Matt doesn't like them being called. Sports pages at 8:35. We've got Tommy Walsh at 8:45 to preview the All-Ireland Hurling semi-finals, which are upon us, if you missed it. Eoin Cadogan is going to join us at 9:10, and Monday Night Rugby at 9:30 this morning. What was your take on how the coverage has now basically all distilled into the gouge, and that's it? There's nothing else to talk about at the weekend.
Like, I mean, in what sense? Like, I mean, it's on the back pages?
It was on front of every paper was the gouge, and so therefore all the old presidents came out and were like, "Oh, this is bad. We need to fix this." And Brody's on the podcast this morning saying that Armagh have a cultural problem, that they are trying to injure players.
Yeah,
and whether or not it's being it's certainly being tolerated was the line that he used.
Well, like I definitely, like we kind of made the point in the show yesterday, that there was like a complete shift in the mood of the game in the second half, where Armagh were trying to twist the knife a little bit on Galway on a psychological level, certainly when it came to what looked like a bit of sledging going on the pitch, and that sort of hard edge that we've seen from not just Armagh, but from a number of teams over the last couple of years. I think it's absolutely fair game to point out that there have been a number of brawls so far this year, and Armagh have been involved in a lot of them. Like, I mean, that is a fact, and I think that it's reasonable to bring up that question.
Yeah. To lose one parent is unfortunate. To lose two is being to look like. What's the line?
I have no idea, but I'm just waiting for the moment now that somebody suggests that we need to bring in the army for the next Armagh match, just to stop the eye gouging or whatever might happen next time they're allowed onto a pitch.
Devil's line. I can't say it. Which army? It's 7:48 this morning. Let's move on. Republic of Ireland, again, brilliant last night against Georgia, and a record equaling away win, which puts us in prime position to at least get out of this group and move on to the next qualifying stage when it comes to the World Cup in Australia. I'm delighted to say Sue Ronan is with us. Sue, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, guys. How's it going?
What did you make of the performance and the quality of it?
You know, I thought it was a really, really good performance from start to finish. When you think of it, the team are most of the team out of season at the moment. You're playing away in a country like Georgia. I think they went about their job professionally, started off the game really, really fast, got the early goal, which of course helps, settles the nerves, but you know, never eased off, never took the foot off the throttle at all, just kept going and going. I think apart from maybe 10, 15 minutes just before half time, maybe when they did ease off a little bit, it was a fully professional performance. And to win any game 9-0, no matter who you're playing, and look, we have to recognise the opposition, you know, we're weak enough, but the end of the day, you can only play what's in front of you. And to win any international match 9-0 and away from home too, it was just a fantastic performance and a great achievement, and it really boosts our goal difference as well.
The ruthlessness is really important in a situation like this, where it would be easy for that sloppy period to actually become the rest of the game, and it peters out and you win 3-0 or 4-0, and it's like, wow, there was a lot more there for us if we'd done it. But actually that didn't happen, and you know, a lot of credit has to go to the players for that, but some of the credit has to go to the management for that too.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love the way the players are knocking the ball around now. You know, every one of them is so comfortable on the ball. They're so comfortable, you know, when they're under pressure on the ball. And okay, they weren't under enough of pressure last night, but the way they were knocking it around, they're moving the ball so quick. Their first touch is excellent. They're on the front foot all the time. The body is open. You know, obviously they're all playing at a really high level now, so they're used to playing fast. They're used to playing under pressure. So it comes from there first, I guess. But of course, you know, the management do get credit as well for encouraging that and encouraging it in games. Like when they played the same way when they were playing against Sweden, when they were playing against Finland, you know, always looking comfortable in possession. Yeah, so it's really, really pleasing on the eye, I have to say, at the moment. They're playing very, very well.
Let's talk about some of the specifics. Abby Larkin, 17, and afterwards Katie McCabe speaks very highly of her post-match. What do you know about Abby Larkin? How good can she be? What's her ceiling?
You know, Abby, you don't want to put pressure on a young kid, of course, on a young kid's shoulders, but Abby was around when I was under 16 coach, actually, there going back probably about 3 or 4 years ago. She was with the schools team at the time, the under 15 schools team. I knew Abby a long time, and her mum as well. She hopefully she'll forgive me for saying, but I saw it all over Twitter. She was one of our the faces around our Big Soccer Sisters program back in the day, you know, as a young girl, and she always had a bit of a swagger about her. She always had a football in her hand, you know, no matter what we were doing. It was a press interview, whatever, she was going around juggling the ball, and you could see football was her life, and her mom brought her everywhere. But she was on the schools team, the under 15 schools team in 2019, I think. And she was a real talent. She did excellent for Richie Berkeley's school team in the Bob Doherty competition. And then I had called her up to the under 16 squad, which was getting together in early 2020. And she was in one camp. And then, of course, we all know what happened after that. So she would have missed a good bit of international football. But, you know, she was always destined to go to the top. I think she can be anything she wants to be. She reminds me of Olivia O'Toole, you know, and I don't want to put pressure on the young kids' shoulders, but I think she's a really excellent talent. She's a lovely kid. She comes from a lovely family. She's playing at one of the top clubs here, and I think she can just get better and better all the time.
How will she fit into this Ireland team, do you think?
You know, I don't think she's far away. I think from what I hear, she's been doing really, really well. Of course, it's wise to use her sparingly because she is quite young, but she's just so comfortable on the ball, and she does things so naturally that, you know, you don't teach kids. And she gets into little half spaces. She holds off players with her body well. I mean, they just seem to come naturally to her, you know. I think she's going to be knocking on the door over the coming year, and I think eventually she's going to make herself, an automatic choice in the squad. But look, let's not put too much pressure on her, I guess. Having said all that, she is a great talent, and I definitely see she'll be in that team for a long time to come.
The Olivia O'Toole comparison is interesting. Is that just pure goal scoring instinct? Is that where the comparison that you're seeing?
I don't know. It's just something about her. Like I obviously would have played with Olivia a long time in the national team myself, and Olivia was a real street footballer. She just had this natural ability to glide by players, to, you know, drop the shoulder and create a bit of space for herself. And Abby just reminds me so much of Olivia and that type of thing, that type of style. And that's the way Abby grew up playing the game. Like she, as I said, she always had a ball in her hand. She played anywhere she could before she was even in a structured club environment. So she just reminds me of Olivia so much. And again, as I said, you don't want to put pressure on the kid, but I definitely think in years to come, we'll be looking at Abby, you know, as one of the regulars in the squad or in the team, and looking at her to do something special, maybe to win a game for us.
I think stuff like this is really important. And I know you're saying don't get carried away, and that's good. But at the same time, if everybody wants to go and see somebody who we think could be a superstar of Irish football, she's playing in Talca Park week in, week out at the moment. Like, there's an opportunity here for everything to kind of just to mushroom really quickly. Maybe she ends up playing for Barcelona. Maybe she stays at Chelsea for the rest of her career. I don't know. But, like, you know, if people are interested and they want to go and see something that is potentially special, it's cheap as chips to go and watch these games at the moment.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, besides Abby, you've other great players that play with Shells and with the other teams around the country as well. I mean, you look at Jess Stapleton, who didn't make the squad last night. I mean, Jess has been around a long time and likewise has come through that same pathway as Abby. Played with boys, gone to school, played with the schools team, the underage squads. And she's a fantastic talent too, and she's doing really well for Shelburne as well. And like, they're both only young girls, they're both only 17 years of age, and they really have the world at their feet in terms of football. As long as they keep the feet on the ground, which I think they both will. They're both from great families. They're being coached well at club level. They're being coached well at international level, you know. So for sure, as you say, it's as cheap as chips to go and watch the games here. And there really is some great talent around, apart from those girls, you know, across all the clubs.
So just about to ask that about the standard of coaching that they're getting. So you think that for a 17-year-old at the moment in the National League here, they're absolutely getting everything they need, and a move to a different league isn't required just yet?
Well, 17 is probably a little bit young to go professionally, in my view. But look, I mean, everyone has their own view about it. I think while our league here is still an amateur league, and it is an amateur league because many of those girls are in college, they're working. I'm not sure how many times a week they train now, probably 3 times, maybe 4, including gym sessions. But, you know, if you look at the players that have gone abroad and have gone to the UK, and how they've gone on to the next level. I mean, look at Katie McCabe and the level she's at now. I mean, she's fantastic. Like, she's one of the best players in England at the moment, you know, without a shadow of a doubt. And she was a really good player here as well. But when she went professional, she even went up a step again. And there's others like her. And the majority of the team last night, I think all apart from the starting 11, apart from Jess Sue. And Jess, I know, was either gone or going to West Ham. So they're all playing at that higher level where they're getting professional, where they're getting coaching day in, day out. But not only that, they're playing against the top players in the world. And, you know, while our league's improving here, the quality of the league in England, it's actually the best league in the world at the moment. And that's where all the best players from around the world are gravitating towards. You just have to look at who's at the different clubs. You know, you have Sam Kerr, the top Australian player, is at Chelsea. You have Pernilla Harder, the best player in Denmark, is at Chelsea. You know, and I could go on and on. So for sure, to play professionally, that is the level they all need to be playing at. You know, am I saying should a 17-year-old go? In my view, it might be a year or two too young, because like they're still doing their college, and that's important as well. Or sorry, doing their studies, their leaving cert probably, that's important. But you know, in the coming years, you know, if our league doesn't get to that status where we can have a semi-professional league or a professional league, for sure, I think the next step in those girls' career is to go and play professionally.
Go on, sorry.
Can I just ask then, like, when it comes to that quality coaching, how important the last 2 weeks would have been for some of those players, especially those based in the National League in Ireland here? Just the fact that they went on a 10-day training camp to Turkey before this fixture against Georgia. Like, I mean, they'll say it was for acclimatisation and all that, but I'd assume a Vera Pauw training camp for 10 days isn't for the faint-hearted, and I'd say there would have been a good bit of development, a good bit of quality training that would have gone into a few of those players who might not be exposed to that level of coaching all the time.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they are all exposed to a good level of coaching here. I know the coaches that are with the clubs. The difference is they wouldn't have them together, you know, for that length of time, I suppose. But for sure, a 10-day camp in Turkey, I mean, that gives any coach the opportunity to work on every single aspect of play. So they went there to acclimatise. I think it seems the weather wasn't as hot in Georgia as maybe anticipated, but nevertheless, they did what you know they felt was the right thing, and I'm sure it was the right thing to go to Turkey. It was also closer to Georgia, so I suppose in terms of travelling over for the game, that was an easier travel for them. But they would have been working on their patterns of play, not only for the game last night, but also at One Eye in September. I have no doubt, because that's the last time those players are going to be together until they come in 4 or 5 days before they play Finland at home. And at that point, they'll all be in season. They'll all be playing for their clubs. So that'll have to be managed when they come in. So they all arrive in on a Monday. They can't go, you know, into full flat out training. Some of them may have played on Sunday. Some might be carrying injuries, you know, that type of thing. So that has to be a periodization in their training that week leading up to the Finland game. So So I have no doubt the 10 days they've just had in Turkey worked an awful lot with those two games in mind, worked on patterns of play. They would have worked on set play. They would have worked on different things, because I think the match against the Philippines last week, it wasn't the same starting 11 as last night. So Vera is still looking around to see what our best 11 is. And I heard her interview, and she's picking players based on how they're getting on in training and what they're doing in each game. And, those girls last night, every single one of them would have really staked a claim to start against Finland. It'd be very difficult for her now to leave any of those out. But hey, that's the job of a coach.
Yeah, and like so much rides on qualification now at this stage. Like we're getting ready to talk about the Euros, but there's kind of this desperate sense of missing out, that like the Euros right there and we're playing really good football and the game has never been, peaking more than it has, and how amazing would it be to actually be at a major tournament with the games all on telly. That will happen. Yeah. That's definitely going to happen at some point, but the sooner that it happens, the quicker the dam bursts.
No, absolutely. Look, I mean, and I've seen it in other countries over the years, when your women's national team qualify for major finals, that really is the catalyst for the game to go that way, to go up in that respective country. And the girls have been knocking on the door for a long time. And, it wasn't only the last campaign where they missed out to Ukraine. And I'm sure that's on every single one of their minds, how they let that one get away. Because, let's be honest, they did let it get away, because we know they should have beat Ukraine. They had enough possession, they had enough chances to do that. And it just didn't happen, unfortunately. But I think there's so many players in that squad now. If you look at the number of caps they have, there's so many of them. There's one or two over the 100 mark. Nia Fahy, Anya O'Gorman. There's some of them very, very close to the 100 mark. And even young players like Denise. I mean, Denise is 25, 26 years of age. And look at the number of caps she has. But they now have that experience. They've been through that heartache for a few campaigns. They've been through the disappointment. They have built up that resilience now within themselves. They have that determination, that mental strength. And for sure it will happen soon. I suppose they've missed out, as I say, a couple of times over the last few campaigns. They're determined not to let it happen again. And it will happen soon. It is a shame we're not playing in the Euros in England. It's so close. The girls are used to the ones that play in England, would love to have played there as well, I'm sure. But look, I think it will happen sooner rather than later.
How good was Megan Connolly last night?
I thought she was super. And she got player of the match, and rightly so. I thought Jess Sue pushed her very, very closely, I have to say. Again, for a young girl coming in, she was excellent. But Megan was really, really excellent. And Megan has always had a sweet right foot. She played underage, was just coming into my squad just before I finished with the team. She was sort of in and out. She was available. She wasn't available. She was in college in the States. So it wasn't always easy to get her free from exams or whatever. But, you put her on a dead ball around the edge of the box and you'd be guaranteed to win to the top of the net. I've seen her do it with our under-19s. Set play, corners as well. She can put it on a sixpence. But, some of her pass and her switching of play, the ball was going straight to a player's foot. It was just sublime. It was lovely to watch. It really was. She was excellent.
It's like that dead ball proficiency, which may actually be as important as some of the silky football that we've seen when it gets to a situation like a game against Finland on the 1st of September. Sure. And listen, in the first game, she put one into the top corner, didn't she, against Finland? And it's those set pieces that might be crucial.
Oh, for sure. And, we're scoring goals from everywhere now, which is great. It's not, back in the day, Irish teams in general, I suppose, really, you waited for that set play and that might have been your only opportunity of scoring a goal. But that's not the case with this team now. But having said that, when you're playing the really top teams, it very often might be the only outlet or opportunity to score a goal. And when you have somebody like Louise Quinn in your team who will get on the end of every ball coming into the box, she's so strong in the air, she's so determined, she's so accurate. And then you have Megan putting those balls in for her, and also Katie then on the other side. I mean, it's really such an advantage for the team. I'd say, when we're playing, any teams we're playing against, they quake in their boots. I'd say one of the instructions from the coach is don't give away any corners, don't give away any free kicks around the edge of the box, because we're becoming known now to be very dangerous in those situations.
So we're a point ahead of Finland at this point. We're on 11. Finland are on 10 points before that September match. There is a different it feels anyway, a different sense of pressure around this, obviously, because we're later into the campaign come September, but also because Finland, to a degree, it felt maybe got caught a little bit unawares about the development that Ireland had actually made, and getting beaten by them in the last game. Like, they'll be coming back really hungry for a bit of revenge in September. Does that change how Ireland approach the game in September, or maybe even your own confidence levels about that performance that might be incoming?
I don't think so. We're in the driving seat now. We're a point ahead. We really deserved our win away to Finland. We've been an improving team for years. Again, in my last campaign, we played Finland. Finland were the second seed in our group. I can't remember who the top seed were. It might have been Spain. But like that, we would have been aiming for that second place. And we lost narrowly at home 2-1 in Tala. And we really didn't play well that day. And the players knew it themselves. And many of the players are still in the squad. And we went away really determined to, confident that we were going to beat them away. And that would have got us that second place. But on the day, it didn't happen, and things started to go wrong, and that mental resilience wasn't there, and it just didn't work out. But I think we've been an improving team for years. As I say, Finland are still a second seed. I think we're a better team than Finland. I wouldn't fear them at all coming here. In actual fact, if you look at a draw against them, provided we beat Slovakia away, will do us. But you don't approach the game that way, of course. But I think Finland will fear us more than we'll fear them. I think the girls are relish now playing in Tala and against Finland.
I was going to say the Tala thing, right? There has been some talk or calls for us to try and start moving big games to the Aviva. It feels like we're just a little bit early in the cycle for that. Personally, we've watched Croke Park all year be empty until it's full, and then the atmosphere is amazing.
Exactly.
Tala, when it's full, the atmosphere is going to be absolutely amazing. If you think back to the men's team against Luxembourg, when that tiny little stadium in Luxembourg, which might have been 9,000 capacity, full of Luxembourg supporters, it was a brilliant atmosphere. Tala full could be an absolutely brilliant atmosphere, and maybe we just need to turn that into our fortress first, and then move the absolutely massive games to the Aviva as one-offs.
Absolutely, and that's the point, and people don't understand it, I guess, or maybe they're not thinking about it. If you think of Tala Stadium, what does it hold? 8,000 now, maybe a little bit more with all the development. We've been probably putting 5.5. I'm not sure we've got up to 6 in it, so we haven't actually filled it out yet. Even though I think 1 or 2 of the matches in the last year beforehand, it said it was sold out, but maybe everyone didn't turn up. But for sure, if you put that 8,000 of full capacity from Tala into the Aviva Stadium, it's one corner of the pitch. One corner of the stand. The players won't get the benefit of that, that noise, that surge from the fans that can carry you, when things are not going well on the pitch, maybe the head is going down, you've done something wrong, made a mistake. The crowd will lift you through, and there's such a bond now between this team and the crowd, and even more so on the men's side, and that's just the way it is in women's football. The accessibility for players to the fans, and you see it after every match, win, lose or draw. The players are over signing autographs, getting pictures taken, and the fans live for that, and they love that. That wouldn't happen at the Aviva, and I think for sure, I agree. Fill out Tala, get what we need to get from there. Use that wave of emotion, wave of support that we get in that small, close-knit stadium that will be full, I'm sure, for the Finland game. Feed off it. Get to the World Cup finals, and then after that, you can start looking at maybe bringing marquee friendly games or something one-off, to the Aviva, and see how that works out and build on it that way.
Yeah, 100%. Sue, great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Cheers.
No problem. Take care.
That's former Ireland manager Sue Ronan talking to us about our 9-0 win over Georgia last night. It's 8 minutes past 8 this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can use the hashtag OTBAM, or of course you can tweet us at Off The Ball. Now, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Golf Weekly is heading to Kilkenny Castle on Tuesday the 5th of July. Are you going? You're polishing off the clubs?
I haven't been invited yet.
Didn't get the invite?
No. Have you been invited?
Unfortunately, I'm not available for selection on the day.
Okay.
We have a brilliant day lined up with a Peter Lorre clinic, live podcast recording, food, prizes, and of course a round of golf at the brilliant Kilkenny Castle. Golf Weekly Golf Days are exclusive events for friends of the pod. So what are you waiting for? Sign up now at otbsports.com/Golf Weekly. Up next, we're live with Matt Williams and Gregor Paul ahead of Ireland's first match with the Maori All Blacks tomorrow morning, kicking off at 8:05 Irish time. First, here's Ruth Vahey alongside Stephen Doyle in last night's Off The Ball, reacting to Ireland's emphatic victory away to Georgia. See you back after these.
So the state of play is, you mentioned the Finland game. Sweden have played one game more, admittedly, but they're well cleared. They're on 19 points, 7 games played. So 19 points Sweden, 7 games played. Ireland and Finland have both played 6 games. Ireland 11 points, Finland 10 points. So with Finland coming to Dublin on the 1st of September, a draw for Ireland here. It is the penultimate game of the campaign. A draw for Ireland is enough to keep their noses ahead of Finland, presuming they don't muck up the final game of the campaign. That is eminently doable. I mean, this will be, if they don't, I hate to say, even raise that proposition just now, but if they don't, this will be a very, very painful third place for Ireland.
Yeah. I think it's okay to say that as well. It is. I mean, if they don't, they've beaten Finland away already. They deservedly so as well. And I am confident that they can beat Finland at home in Dublin, yes, and
this
win
team
it there.
have traditionally had a wobble in them, and like a result that everyone looks back at and go,
Ukraine last campaign.
The Ukraine-esque.
McCabe missed the penalty.
Ukraine is a nice way to put it.
This is the next step for the team, is to not have that wobble.
Yeah. And the majority of these players would have featured in that game, and you don't forget those games. You don't forget those games, and they've had to wait a long time to put that wrong right. And I think now, coming into this game with that form and the players that you've highlighted as well, like the beautiful thing is, it's not just McCabe and O'Sullivan show anymore. There's other players who can stand up now.
Well, Megan Connolly today Connolly was superb, and it wasn't just her passing was sharp, her deliveries were fantastic, but she held that kind of central midfield role where she dictated the play. She was pulling all the strings. Little John was more of a defensive midfielder, but she didn't have too much defending to do today. But Megan Connolly, absolutely superb. She's a brilliant footballer. And also we have to give Abby Larkin credit, because she came off the bench to make her competitive debut, linked up with her Shelbourne clubmate, and a brilliant header to get her first international goal. And not just that as well, Joe, Rout will probably talk more on it. She would have seen a lot more of Abby playing with Shelbourne. But for a 17-year-old, she's so clever at picking up the right spots in the box. Like, she's really, really good, which is crucial for a striker.
Yeah.
And Ruth, can I ask you, so Stephen mentions there, like the likes of Connolly and the other midfielders bossing the game a touch. It would seem Denise O'Sullivan is such an extraordinary player. She can be high up the pitch and playing like a quintessential number 10. But equally, I mean this genuinely, like N'Golo Kante-esque at nipping in and stealing balls.
Yeah.
And you look at her and you say, well, I'd like you in both spots, but I suppose if Ireland's need, scoring goals is generally a problem in men's and women's football. If you have to have a point of emphasis for her, it would be further at the pitch creating things and hurting teams further at the pitch. And so if those fellow midfielders Stephen mentioned can get to grips, and when you can release Denise
They do make good
forward,
box-to-box midfielders in Cork, Joe, don't they?
Look, she can get she can get up and down. I know she can, but it does release her a little bit, which would be very welcome. I would put it to
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Football Pod on OTB Sports.
Do you still listen to the football pod, or is that like texting your ex?
Absolutely. As I often said, I'm jealous that O'Donoghue is so good, the little whore, but he's it's brilliant. I listened to the one yesterday. Thank God for Tommy Rooney. I won't say that too often, but thank God for him. At least he stood up for me a bit. But the two boys were very big on Kerry yesterday.
The Football Pod is available every Tuesday exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, it's 14 minutes past 8. You're very welcome back to OTB AM. It's time for us to turn to rugby. It is the first of 3 tests on Saturday morning. Obviously, Ireland are playing the New Zealand Maoris tomorrow morning, and I'm delighted to say Matt Williams and Gregor Paul are with us to help preview the game. Gregor, I might start with you. A bit of a mini bombshell broke overnight last night when it turned out that Joe Schmidt is actually going to be actively part of the coaching ticket for this week. This is some might say Ireland's worst nightmare, where Joe, who was our beloved son, suddenly is plotting our downfall. Was this always Was this always secretly part of New Zealand's master tactical plan to derail Ireland in this summer test, and COVID's just a flimsy excuse so they can shoehorn him to the coaching ticket?
Not really, but I think it would be naive to believe that Joe hasn't been pretty heavily involved up until this point anyway. I know he officially wasn't going to start until after the Irish series was out of the way, but look, I think he's had a pretty healthy input prior to being officially called in. COVID has enabled him to now come in, on an emergency ticket, if you like, and eased his conscience a wee bit because he felt a wee bit uncomfortable, given his relationship with Ireland and his history there. He didn't, that's why he was actually delaying his arrival until after the series was out of the way. But he's now here, and he's a legitimate reason for being involved. And look, I think Joe Schmidt input would have been pretty heavy whether he was officially here or not.
What was he doing up to this point, and what will his role be after this emergency situation is resolved?
Up until this point, he's been working with the Blues, the Super Rugby team, the Blues, as a sort of, I'm not entirely sure what his official title there was, technical director. So whatever he felt like doing, I think that meant. I think he'll be with the team now for the duration of the series, and then when they go to South Africa, his official role is selector/analyst, but I think you could interpret that as selector/assistant coach, probably. Okay,
and is that also /head coach in waiting, or does Scott Robertson have still, kind of hang on a second, what do I have to do here?
Well, yeah, Scott Robertson probably does wonder that. Look, Joe's coached at the international level, hasn't it? He's done it very well. He's got a fantastic record with Ireland. The question, I suppose, with Joe is he ready mentally, lifestyle-wise? Does he want to go back there? Because when he finished up with Ireland, you'll know this way better than I would, he was pretty drained. It had a big mental toll on him. When he came back here, he didn't really have any desire to coach. He was quite happy down in Taupo, not part of proceedings, didn't want to be involved. And he was asked. I mean, Ian Foster wanted him on his ticket when he took the job in 2020. Joe, not for me. And then probably beginning of last year, Foster started to really push hard to persuade him to get involved. And Joe was reluctant, and he's eventually got to the point where he's happy to say, I'm happy to come in as an analyst and as a selector. But I think anyone that knows Joe will imagine that once he's in, to kind of only have 1 foot in there, I don't see that being his long-term future. I think he probably, once he commits. And once he joins the All Blacks, I think he's the kind of character, and you guys would know more than I would here, whether he'd be happy long-term being the assistant or in the background. It's a question of whether he's ready to put his hand up and put himself in the front line. Because if he felt the pressure of coaching Ireland, you're in the wrong job if you're not up to dealing with pressure, because being coach of the All Blacks, that's a lot more pressure than comes with coaching Ireland, I think.
And those fans of the All Blacks, Gregor, do they look at Joe Schmidt as somebody who is a genius at a game, and his record with Ireland and with Leinster is so good that he can only contribute positive things to the team? Or is there some question marks maybe around Ireland's style of play, and maybe it doesn't necessarily match up with the swashbuckling All Blacks way?
Well, I think what he's bringing is something that the All Blacks need a wee bit of at the moment. So, that swashbuckling, your word there, I like that style that the All Blacks have. That's probably always going to be inherently in the DNA of the players, because it's how they want to play. It's the type of athletes that they are. Where everyone's become a wee bit concerned about the All Blacks, and where Ireland and South Africa have exploited them, and England did it at the World Cup, is around the kind of set-piece efficiency, the physicality that they bring over the breakdown. So, they've got all the skills in the world, and if you give them space and time, they'll pull any team apart. But there's a question mark now about whether they've got the nuts and bolts, the kind of hardness, the edge, the discipline to stick to quite a rigid, conservative game plan first, to break teams down and then open them up. And that's the kind of stuff that South Africa are doing really well. Ireland do it really well as well. So New Zealand need a wee bit of that. And Joe brings it. He's got that kind of ability to stick to a very disciplined, simple game plan. So, look, I think everyone's going to welcome that. And secondly, what he also has is pretty good knowledge of how the Northern Hemisphere sides think. And again, that's proving to be a wee bit of an Achilles heel for New Zealand at the moment. If we bracket South Africa as a Northern Hemisphere side, which they almost are, then South Africa, Ireland, France and England are the last 4 teams to have beaten the All Blacks. And there's a wee bit of a pattern developing there, so they need to understand a wee bit about the threat that's coming at them, and Joe gives them that.
Matt Williams, what was your immediate response or take when you saw that Joe Schmidt is now part of this coaching ticket, and listening to Gregor there talking about this, you get the sense that there's a certain element of it being a drug, coaching at that level, and you can wean yourself off it, but when you're back on it, you're going to be back on it pretty hardcore. And the New Zealand job is literally the best and most interesting job in world rugby. Particularly
a lot there, Ger. The New Zealand job is the most prestigious job in world rugby, but Greg has hit the nail right on the head. It is the biggest pressure in the world as well. It's a very tough job. Look, I know Joe was really, really frazzled at the end of his time in Ireland, as any human being would be. Why don't, with the exception of Eddie Jones, and let's put him off as an exception, mentally he's an exceptional person. We use the term workaholic. Eddie is a workaholic, so let's put him to one side. When you're coaching at the top end, it smashes you emotionally, and you've got to learn to cope with that, and obviously Joe has. It's whether you decide you don't want that pressure anymore. That doesn't mean you don't love the game or you don't want to coach. Let's look at Wayne Smith, the great Wayne Smith. Now, Wayne started coaching back with me in 90. I started in 97. Wayne came into coaching in 98. Now, Wayne has been head coach of a lot of places. He still loves the game and wants to be involved, but he doesn't want to be a head coach anymore, because that brings with it a whole lot of extra stresses that your assistant coach does not have. And in many ways, being an assistant's the best gig in the world, because what do? You just do all the things you love, which is the players, the game, the tactics. You don't have to worry too much about the media. You don't have to worry about selections, usually. You don't have to worry too much about what committees are saying and all that. That's the boss's job. So I think that Joe may very well, or he is coming back into this role, and I think he may be very well happy to be second spear on the left, where he doesn't have to worry and carry all that extra baggage. Greg is absolutely spot on. As soon as I heard this talk of Joe, I just thought, the media are going to be all over this. Joe's obviously been involved for a long, long time in the preparation for this series. The series that, like in professional rugby, the coaches don't get together on Monday morning and say, boys, we've got a game on Saturday. What are we doing? We're going to do this now? Like, they've been preparing for months and months for this series, because what's the information they've got on Ireland? They've only got the Six Nations. So they've gone back and they've based a lot of their analysis on what Ireland did during the Six Nations. They've obviously then, they say, and we know COVID's there, they war game, we'll use that term war game, in other words, what if scenarios. What if Ireland lose Henderson, what they've done today? Who are they going to put in? What if Sexton doesn't play? Who are they going to put in? And they would have their plans prepared for all the Irish what ifs. Just as today, with Ian Foster and Johnny Plumtree down with COVID, they've war gamed that. They've this whole group have been in Australia last year in a bubble through COVID. And they're saying, well, what happens if one of us gets it? What happens if two of us get it? What happens if the whole staff's out? What happens if our captain's out? They war game and they practice. Now, I can tell you Foster and Johnny Plumtree are at home, they're away from the team, but they're obviously Skyping in each day. They'll be getting the video of training every day. That's training at every professional rugby club is recorded and analysed and sent to them, and they'll be giving feedback to Mo, who I've read is Gregor would know more than me. I'm only reading what he's writing, and other journalists from New Zealand are writing, is the head coach. And Joe will be an incredibly important part of that preparation as a support. But to think that Joe turned up Monday morning and is going to change everything, and every tactic that they practice is going to be all altered, I mean, that is just madness. It's not the truth. The truth is he is part of a system now. He will enjoy it, but that system will have rolled on no matter if Ian Foster's there or not. And the talk is that Foster and Plumtree may be at the game. Again, Gregor will know more about that than me.
Yeah, I think, I buy everything both of you are saying here. I think, Gregor, it's particularly interesting, like the knock on Schmidt's time in Ireland from some quarters was that we had become a little bit predictable because we were so focused on the set piece and so focused on the structure. And the point you make too about the New Zealand, the swashbuckling is going to be innate because the skill level of the players. It does, for us, the terror is that actually he adds that structure, that skill set is there innately in the players, and suddenly a new beast is unleashed on World Rugby where they can do everything really well at a pace that nobody can live with.
Yeah, well, that's clearly their plan. And that's what they're aiming for. They're aiming for exactly that. You look at that back line, and it's pretty impressive, isn't it? Aaron Smith, Bowden Barrett, when they're all fit. Rico Ioane, Caleb Clark, Will Jordan, who has been virtually untouchable in Super Rugby. So you're thinking, shit, you don't want these guys, if you're playing them, to be playing with space, with time. You don't want them to play off counter-attack if you're trying to defend them, because they're instinctive, they're so quick, they're all so skilled. They're going to rip a few teams apart. We all know that. They have done previously, and they will do again. But where they've been a wee bit weak, and when they've hit, South Africa are brilliant at putting a brick wall up, aren't they? They give nothing away. They box kick, they turn you around, they scrummage you for penalties, they slow the game right down, and they've frustrated New Zealand to the point where they've got on the front foot so hard that New Zealand haven't been able to throw anything at them in the last couple of times they've played. And Ireland have been reasonably similar in how they've shut them out of the game. So that's the turnaround point for New Zealand. And look, they're destined here. If we look at the World Cup, unless my boys in Scotland can play the role of disruptor, then we're looking at a World Cup where New Zealand play one of either South Africa or Ireland at the quarterfinal of the World Cup. And that's not so much at the back of the mind at the moment. That's actually at the forefront of the mind for these guys, because if New Zealand can't prove in the next 5 test matches that they've got a game plan that can flourish against these two teams, then I think we're going to be on I wouldn't say definitely, but we're moving towards a track where there will have to be a serious consideration given to coaching regime change at that point. Because New Zealand can't go to the World Cup with, if Ireland win this series, even if Ireland win one test and do so in a manner that shuts New Zealand down, where Barrett's just a shadow, not able to get into the game, and they can't get anything going, as has been the way in the past, that will probably be enough for everyone in New Zealand to say, well, that's too big a risk to send this coaching group to the World Cup next year, because if Ireland do that in a quarterfinal, we're out. And we know that now, so we're going to have to change that up. So that's kind of what we're looking at here.
So not only are Ireland going on one of the toughest summer tours you can do as a test side, they're also going to a country that is going through a bit of an identity, not an identity crisis, but are trying to find their identity, have a coaching ticket that need to prove themselves, a group of players that need to prove themselves, and are just hoping to crush anybody who tries to get out with an arse's roar of them.
I think you've nailed that beautifully. That's exactly what's going to have to happen here. And look, it's not just about the coaching team. There's a few players that need to prove that they're still able to do that, because we haven't seen the best of, for various reasons, injury. He's been in Japan, but Brodie Retallick hasn't been Brodie Retallick as we all know him for quite a while now. So he's up against a very good group of Irish locks. I think you could pick any of them and they'll be pretty challenging. So, we need to see him get back to fighting these guys to the point where he looks dominant. Sam Whitelock, look, he had a brilliant Super Rugby final with his aerial work, and he is a great aerial forward. But when New Zealand went to the Northern Hemisphere last year, the French and Irish locks were really dynamic around the field. They had a change of pace when they hit the ball. They were sneaking turnovers. They were making tackles like they were loose forwards. They looked more athletic and more dynamic than Sam. So there's a question mark there. Can he come up to the level of a James Ryan or an Ian Henderson or whoever is going to be playing for Ireland? And ditto the front row, because that's where Ireland really had them, and France had them the following week. Front rows are getting off the deck quickly, passing and catching, hitting things hard. New Zealand looked very undynamic in that area. Props that could scrum, but not much else. So these are the questions that we have. It's not just about the coaching team. There's a handful of players that need to prove that they can not only play at this level still, but that they can get better between now and the World Cup.
It's very high stakes, Matt. From Ireland's perspective, what do you think is a break even or a good tour or something that we can take positives from? Do we need to win at least one game here, or is there a world in which you can actually lose all the games, play really well, uncover some new talent and some new patterns of play and think, okay, that's grand, we've learned a lot from this? Is it just about results at this stage for this Ireland setup, and that includes the players and the coaching ticket?
Always about results, never anything else, mate. Don't go about it, but it's just one before we go to Ireland. You got to understand what Gregor says is 100% true. It's been like that for 100 years. Like if you go to New Zealand rugby, you lose 2 games in a row in New Zealand, you're in crisis. The country's in crisis. They are ruthless with their coaches and with their players, and they have always have been. You know, you talk to the great Grant Fox, who Joe is taking over from. Talk about the ruthlessness and the pressure that was put on those players back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. That is what drives New Zealand rugby. It is the most ruthless place on the planet to be a rugby player or a rugby coach. You have a bad month and you are in serious trouble and you are ripped apart. And that comes back to what Greg is saying about pressure on Joe. Do you really want that? Does that come back to Ireland? Ireland is a very different rugby environment to what New Zealand is, as is most places around the world. Ireland are going to the hardest place on the planet to play a team who are desperate to prove themselves. You just heard what Gregor said. And they had a COVID year last year, and we've got to, let's be fair, the New Zealanders and the Argentinians were in a bubble for months. Now, that biosecurity bubble, we know from rugby league in Australia, had massive mental health issues with the players. You're not in a bubble. You're sensory deprived. You're away from your family. You can't go out. You can't go to socialise in the community. You can't go to the beach. You can't do anything. You've got to stay in your hotel and you're in. And that's what they had to do. By the end of the November season, New Zealand were fried. So they're a very, very different opponent. The tour, the way it's structured, I said, when I first heard the structure of the tour last year, I said, one test is a great tour for New Zealand. One test win is a great tour. They've beaten England in Twickenham. They went toe-to-toe with the best team in the world at the moment, which is France, in my opinion, and they lost, but they went toe-to-toe because this team radically changed from Joe Schmidt's game plan last November. And not being disrespectful to Joe, that's just a fact. We all saw it. They're playing a more New Zealand type of game. They are running the ball and they've been highly efficient. They've taken a mirror image of what Leinster do and they've put it into the national side to get a national philosophy from bottom to top, just like New Zealand do. It's brilliant. You go to New Zealand, you win any test, that is a great tour. That's a great tour. Australia haven't done it for many, many, many years, and we play them 3 times a year. Now, what will look good there? Any win will look good. The midweekers are still going to be hard. Now, the Maori have picked young guys, but they are highly talented young men playing for their future, trying to get a toe into the national team. And that national team is desperate. The first test is where New Zealand are, of a series, is where New Zealand are always vulnerable, not weak, but vulnerable. And what did the New Zealanders do? They put it at Eden Park, where they haven't lost a game in 44 games since France beat them in 1994. So the New Zealanders know they want a clean slate. So it is possible for Ireland. The odds are saying Ireland won't win a game. That's the odds. That's history. So if Ireland can win something, that's a great test. If you can go toe-to-toe with New Zealand and lose, that's still a positive. What you don't want is what New Zealand are capable of is you stick with them for an hour and the last 20 they run in 4 tries. So it's 50 to 15 or something. That's not a good tour. So there's a whole lot of ways Ireland have got to look at this. But the money, if you've got any money, you put it on New Zealand. And anything that comes out beyond that for Ireland, I think is a plus.
Okay, so you don't actually think we're going to win a test over the 3?
I think Ireland this is a very good Irish side. They're very well coached. They're capable of winning a test. Absolutely, they are capable of winning a test. I'm not suggesting that at all, Ger. I think this Irish team can win. And I think that the odds were the first test was their best bet. The fact that that's been moved to Eden Park has moved it. They can win, but the odds are saying they won't. But I certainly believe they can. And look, it might change. They might get a better shot at the second test. You know, Dunedin or Wellington might be a better shot for them than Eden Park has been for everyone else since 1993. But we've got to say that this isn't an Irish side that's going there with no form or no chance, they're psychologically shot. It's not the case. This is a very good Irish side. They've had a lot of success against New Zealand in recent years. But this challenge that they are facing is different. It's not Chicago. It's not November in Dublin. This is New Zealand when New Zealand are angry and primed. And that is a very, very different animal you're taking on.
It's funny, Gregor, listening to Matt. Like, I think that's generally how most Irish rugby fans feel. If we were to get one win from this, we'd be absolutely thrilled. Whereas what you're talking about is the state of crisis that has enfolded the management team, and so the stakes are so high for that group. Like, New Zealand are 12-point favourites with the Irish bookmakers. I don't know what the prices are. They must be fairly similar down under as well. And that's kind of our expectation, is that New Zealand are nearly 2 tries better than Ireland in Eden Park on Saturday morning our time when the game kicks off. Is the expectation still from you and your colleagues that New Zealand, notwithstanding all the trouble, they will still win these games?
I don't know if they will. Yeah, look, probably I would go into this series exactly what Matt just said there. Like, it takes a phenomenal, and Ireland know this, because they had so many times at getting close to beating Ireland before they actually did it. Like, they're a cockroach of a team. They're really difficult to put away anywhere in the world, wherever you encounter them, even if they're at the end of a 15-week isolated ISO bubble tour in Dublin in November. I mean, you've got to remember, even though it looked like Ireland won that game quite easily back in November, one forward pass between the Ioane brothers, and they would have scored, and they would have been the least deserving winners ever, but they probably would have won that game if that pass hadn't been called forward. And that's who they are. They've got this ability to survive, and they're angry, they're desperate, they're playing at a ground they haven't lost at for 100 years or whatever ridiculous number it is. So to beat New Zealand, you have to play 84, 85 minutes of your best game ever. It's got to be the best that Ireland have got. They've got to get to that level and sustain it from minute 1 to minute whenever the referee finally blows the whistle. And that's a huge ask. It takes a lot of things to go right for them, because you're playing a team that, even if they're off where they need to be, as we saw in Dublin, one bit of Will George magic, he scores a try. One bit of Rieko Ioane magic, they nearly score another try. And that's who they are. So, look, there's always a sense with the All Blacks that they go into a game, even no matter what history tells you, recent history, no matter what their form might look like, no matter what the crisis might be at the moment with the management team, when they name the 15 or the 23 guys that they're going to put on the park this Saturday, everybody will be looking, going, wow. All the anxiety, but you're still listing guys. Beauden Barrett in the form of his life. Aaron Smith, still a world-class number 9. Ioane playing better than he ever has in the midfield. They'll probably have, I don't know whether it's going to be Fanganuku or Caleb Clark on the left wing, but there'll be someone causing a bit of havoc out there for them. So when you're Ireland, you're looking at that going, this is a team in crisis. And look at the 23 guys that they got on that bit of paper.
Yeah.
You got to be realistic about what it takes. As Matt says, to live with them for 60 minutes is a good. That's a good thing to be able to do. But they'll go up another gear on Saturday in the final 20, and there's a big ask of Ireland. Can you find another gear and live with them? And you might be 15-12 after 60 minutes. New Zealand have got a habit of turning 15-12 into 39-12, 43-12, and it looks pretty bad at the end for Ireland. What might happen here? So, Ireland are good enough to win a game, but everything has to align for them to do that, and all the kind of emotional anger and frustration that's in the New Zealand system at the moment, you suspect that they're pretty good at finding a way to make that quite powerful for them. And quite a big energy that they're going to take into the game. And look, I'd be surprised if it doesn't end up 3-0 to New Zealand in the end.
Yeah, I think we all would be too. Happily surprised on our side. Some breaking news from Cian Tracy of the Irish Independent, tweeted 12 minutes ago to say that Ian Henderson has damaged his knee with some significant damage and has been he's flying home. So he got injured in training, and for now Andy Farrell is not going to call up a replacement, which means that it looks like Tadhg Byrne is going to start alongside James Ryan. It'll be Byrne's first start since the Six Nations. Matt, that's devastating, because we don't have huge strength and depth in the second row at international quality, And the fact that Byrne has not played since the Six Nations, he would have been a perfect sub to bring on for the last 15-20 minutes when things were in the melting pot, and now he's got to start the game. So you're just going down the depth chart a little bit, and the depth chart is not particularly deep in the second row.
No, it's not. You've got to feel for Henderson. He's had a wretched 10 months of injuries, and I certainly hope it's not a anterior cruciate and he's out for 9 months, but it doesn't sound good if they're saying it's significant and he's been sent home. That doesn't sound good. Look, the plus of bringing Byrne in is he is another back rower. He is very good in the line-out, so you're obviously a line-out option there, but he is also exceptional around the field at the breakdown. He's one of the best, if not the best, jackler in Irish rugby. And if you are going to beat New Zealand, you have to disrupt them at the breakdown. When Australia play well against New Zealand, their back rowers, Michael Hooper and so on, are disrupting them. They are slowing and they are stealing. So there is a plus in Byrne coming in. The question is, you're going to go from not playing from the Six Nations to a pace of a game that will be absolutely electric. Like if you watch the final of Super Rugby last week, even though it was wet, like it was just at a pace that was unbelievable. And that is what New Zealand will try and do to Ireland, put a pace on a game at international level that they won't live with for 80 minutes. And that's the point. You might live with it for 60, but can you live with 80? So I would suggest your Byrne has got possibly an hour in him, and then they'll be going to do the bench. And it'll be very interesting to see who Ireland put onto their bench as their backup lock for that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Matt Williams, Gregor Paul, great for your time this morning. Thanks very much. Gregor, just one last question. Do you expect the New Zealand Maori team tomorrow to beat our team? Is that the general consensus in New Zealand, or is that one kind of like almost a throwaway in some ways?
That's probably a bit of an unknown. That's a youngish looking Maori team. A few players I'm not actually that familiar with. As long as it's entertaining, I think everyone will be quite happy to go down and watch it. But I'm not sure how that will go. Yeah. Truthfully, could be either way.
All right, okay, good stuff. Matt, Gregor, thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Pleasure.
It's 8:41. There's a comment in here. Sexton shouldn't start a single test. It doesn't matter how good he is, says Pascal Jacob. He won't play 4 games in 6 weeks of the World Cup. Better for Carby and Byrne to get the time against the best.
I think regardless of what way you look at it now, especially after listening to that conversation, this is going to be an unbelievable challenge for Ireland.
So what do you do?
Do you just lean into the challenge and go all out and say, let's make this
our World
the
Cup
most
final
chaotic possible situation, which is a situation without Johnny Sexton?
Well, so or like, does he not play? He plays barely a minute in the World Cup. Comes off the bench for 3 games and then starts the World Cup quarterfinal.
I don't know. That's a very, very tricky one to like. I don't know what you do there. I think that you have to have your starting 10 who plays the big pool match against South Africa and plays the quarterfinal.
I'm sure he'll come through unscathed against the South Africans. They won't target him. There'll be no cheap shots there.
I don't think you can have an out half that is put aside for one game, that is destined to play one game. Right. You have to have your starting 10.
Well, you need a couple of starting 10s. Maybe that's it.
Maybe Kieran Frawley is the guy after tomorrow morning.
Maybe. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. At 8:43, let's look through the papers.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be, no, I'm not having that, no.
Right, we can take a quick look through the sports pages for you this morning, and the tabloids are all kind of going on the GA, and there's an exclusive in the Sun I'll get to in a second. Trial by video, Croke Park brawl, fallout continues. The CCCC will meet today to pore over video evidence, and some people are expecting loads of suspensions to come for Galway on the back of that. End of the line for James is the Sun, but also it's a money old game. Collins had to break the Irish transfer record. The big fees. So this is an exclusive by Neil O'Riordan, who links Wolves, Leicester, Leeds, Newcastle and Villa with Nathan Collins. I would love it if Nathan Collins signed for Villa. That would be absolutely brilliant. But Wolves are the front runners if Ruben Neves gets transferred. GA must stop facilitating foul play. Great plugs for off the ball in this. Kevin McStay's talking a lot about off the ball. The stuff that's happening off the ball. At the beginning of each season, I open a Word document and fill it in every week with the rule anomalies that arise during league rounds or early championship. By late May, I have a full column in the oven. A season's summary of rules that were flouted, not enforced, incorrectly applied, not known about, not cared about, and on it goes. This is a really good column from today. I'll finish on this. On Sunday, following 10 minutes of deliberations, the referee concluded he must send off a player from each side. When they emerged for extra time, he did that. Before he threw in the ball for that extra time, both teams were then back up to 15 players. Some punishment for foul play right there. And don't forget, the earlier red-carded Armagh player, Greg McCabe, was also replaced. Farcical rules guarantee farcical outcomes. What a different game it would have been if it was 14 versus 13 in extra time.
Yeah.
The notion that you get your man back,
that's just absolutely absurd.
I just can't understand why it hasn't been fixed. Carl Maloney's with us. Carl, good morning to you.
Good morning, lads.
What's going on?
Lots going on. We'll start with that breaking news from Down Under. Ian Henderson's tour of New Zealand is over. That's after sustaining a knee injury in training. Meanwhile, the Irish team named for tomorrow's game against the Maori All Blacks in Hamilton. Bundy Aki set to captain the side. 5 uncapped players included in the starting 15, including Kieran Frawley at out half. Jimmy O'Brien starts at full back. Jeremy Loughman, Joe McCarthy and Cian Prendergast all in the starting team as well. Last night in football, of course, the Republic of Ireland moved up to second in their World Cup qualifying group. That's with 2 games left to go. Vera Pauw's side 9-0 winners over Georgia in Gorey last night. Katie McCabe scoring a hat-trick for the visitors. Louise Quinn on target twice. Ireland welcomed third place Finland to Tala on September the 1st before finishing their campaign away to Slovakia 5 days later. Here at home last night, Shamrock Rovers moved 10 points clear. That was at the top of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. Stephen Bradley's side 2-1 winners over Dublin rivals St Pat's in Inchicore. While in the first division, Cork City took full advantage of a slip-up from Galway United to move 4 points clear at the summit. That was after a 5-0 win over Treaty United. Galway slumped to a 2-0 defeat away to Longford Town. Elsewhere, Waterford beat Athlone 5-2, while it finished 2-2 between Wexford and Bray Wanderers. At Wimbledon, Andy Murray set up a second round clash with John Isner last night. The 2-time former champion came from a set down to win his first round match with James Duckworth. Among those in action today include the women's top seed Iga Swiatek and 7-time champion Serena Williams in the women's singles, Rafa Nadal and Matteo Berrettini, last year's beaten finalist, among those in action in the men's singles today. Ray Dempsey and Mike Solon among the early favourites to replace James Horan as the Mayo senior football manager. Horan bringing his second 4-year term to an end. That was after Sunday's All-Ireland quarter-final defeat to Kerry. In cricket, Ireland will look to get their T20 series with India back on level terms today. Played due to get underway for that one at a sold-out Malahide at 4:30, weather permitting. And there's a 7-race card at Roscommon this evening. The first going to post there at 5:10.
All right, Carl, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. It's 8:47, I think. We do. Yeah. Tommy, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Ger.
What's the crack?
Yeah, all good now. Semi-final week. This is where it really gets going, Ger. Probably even more intense or exciting than a final itself, I'd say, Ger, because there's one thing that's worse than losing a final. That's losing a semi-final. So this is the one, you want to be there on All-Ireland final day. Final day is just one of them, it's the magical days, one of the days you dream of as a kid growing up, walking out in the parade, meeting the president, staying overnight that night in the team hotel, maybe coming back to the fans hopefully with the cup. But to get there is the key, and that's the mission this weekend. So listen, the build-up, I suppose, brings back memories of your own semi-final weeks, and definitely a big week as regards intensity.
What would you, on semi-final week, was it different for you from final week? Was it actually a little bit less pressure in some ways because you were less worried about tickets and all that stuff, or was it kind of similar?
Yeah, no, tickets never bothered me. My mum was very good that way, and we had a good process going there between the two of us. So tickets never bothered me. And Brian Cody would have advised that. And I remember reading things from the team, the Kerry Golden years that time. That was a big video in our house growing up. So listening to them guys kind of giving advice in some of the world columns and different things. So I learned not to let that be any distraction to myself. So no, semi-final was just as big as the final, if not bigger, because that was the dream, was to get to the final, Ger. Was it any different, the build-up to it? Probably not, because we treat every day like an All-Ireland final or a big day. So yeah, it would be ramped up a little bit, but you're ready for it.
Sorry, did your ma just look after the tickets? That was it, and everybody knew, no, don't talk to me, talk to the mum, and that was it? She decided who was in and who was out?
I can't throw her under the bus here now and pretend that she was disappointing people on final day. No, I had a diary, say if it was on, usually it was the first or second week of September, I'd have it there in the work diary that Sunday, and anyone that ever asked me for a ticket, I went into the diary. And then once we got the tickets, like you could have 50, 60 names in that diary on any All-Ireland final. And I still have the diaries there to go back and look at them. And but just when we got the tickets, then you asked for how many you could get, really. And when you got them, then you just had to go through it. But I have so many uncles and aunties and cousins that, you know, they got first preference anyway, and a couple of your best friends, you know.
Right, okay, fair enough. It's tricky enough. Like, it is something that we take for granted, but I've certainly heard players, certainly teams who make it for the first time, who don't have that to fall back on, that kind of cultural awareness that this is going to be an issue, and somebody says, look, let somebody else look after this for you, that can become a bit of a distraction for players. One other thing, just before we get on to the games this weekend, everybody's talking about the brawl at the weekend. You guys would have gone down the same tunnel for years with your opponents, having knocked lumps out of each other, certainly in the first half of games. Did it ever boil over in the tunnel?
No, ours never boiled over in the tunnel, but I was involved in a good few that boiled over on the field, to be honest, Ger. So I'm not going to take the high horse in this one or anything. Like, you know, unfortunately, things like that have happened over the years, and usually you start at one or two lads, and then you kind of come in to back up your teammate. My experience of them, Ger, really would be to be never really at any punches, really, or it's usually just pushing and shoving, to be honest, maybe grabbing lads, and maybe, you know, you grab a lad onto the ground. But my experience of it is it never really boiled over too badly. Like with I don't ever remember getting a punch, to be honest, in anything like that. Like, so listen, I think it might be a good thing, really, Ger, at the end of the day, because it probably has been with television cameras now. It's so readily available to young people and the wider public that, you know, it probably is. It's seen so much on iPhones now, and this, that so many people see it. It's probably not nice. 30 years ago, the same thing was happening, but nobody was seeing it, if you know what I mean. So it probably will be a good thing, I think, down the road, in that I think the GA will tackle it now, and they'll probably, you know, they'll probably send out letters to county boards and clubs to say, listen, if this happens again, there's going to be huge consequences. And when there is consequences, generally people won't probably fall for it as much, you know. Yeah,
well, fingers crossed. Okay, so the games this weekend, right? Like, we're supposed to know what's going to happen, but do we really? Like, are Limerick untouchable at this stage, or is this where you're going to catch them?
I think Limerick are raging hot favourites, sure. And I think for Galway to play well, they're going to need man of the match performances from their goalie, Éanna Murphy. They're going to need Daithí Burke, David Burke. I know Ger Eoin McInerney probably won't be playing, so I say Joseph Cooney will go back into the half-back line, possibly Pádraig Mannion centre back. I'd expect Joseph Cooney to pick up Ger Eoin McInerney and leave, like, Pádraig Mannion is more a hurler, let the ball into him, he kind of covers for his full-back line and half-back line. He's more a reader of the game, I would think, than a man marker. Now, I know he did mark Owen Cody earlier on the year for Kilkenny and did a good job, but I would rather him hitting a load of ball than sacrificing his game. So I'd rather probably see him in the centre. But Conor Wheel and Conor Cooney, so they're going to need man of the match performances, Ger, out of all these big players, I think, for him to have a chance. And just like the last day against Cork, goals won that game for him. They're going to need a couple of goals on Sunday to beat this Limerick team.
The concerns people have over injuries this season just seem to be so heightened, Tommy. Like, I mean, it's going to be a big storyline going into the football semi-finals as well. Just a lack of time to get over injuries. Like, is your gut feeling that Limerick will have a full deck to choose from this weekend? Obviously, the big question is around Cian Lynch, but like, it's 10 weeks between games now if he does play this weekend. Like, is that a concerning factor at all if you're trying to pick holes in the Limerick argument?
Yeah, I think, Owen, it's a lot easier to come into a brilliant team than maybe come in and expecting to be the main player on the team. I think if Cian Lynch is to be picked this weekend, it's just to fit into that Rolls Royce of a machine that they have at the moment. He's just one player of part of a 15. Whereas if he's on any other team in the country, like we'll say a Tony Kelly or an Owen Cody or we'll say, Dahi Burke for Galway, you're expected, or Conor Whelan, we'll say the forward for Galway, you're expected that if you don't play well, the team will lose. Whereas Cian Lynch won't have that worry. So John Kiely can throw him in. He can put him in centre forward there. Cotton O'Neill has been there and doing quite well, but he's a young player. And maybe he'll want to maybe show faith in Cotton O'Neill, say, listen, you have the jersey and you've done quite well, so you can hold on to it. But there's certain players that if they're fit, they play. And Cian Lynch is one of them for me. So I would be thinking even you'd be looking forward without cockiness, because John Kiely wouldn't do that. Paul Kinnerk wouldn't do that. But with an eye on, listen, if we're in the final, we will need Cian Lynch. So I would be throwing him in anyway, yeah.
Is there anything that we've seen from Galway this year that gives them confidence heading into this game, that there's enough about them from a physicality perspective, from a hurling perspective? Because it doesn't feel like they've peaked yet under Shefflin. It feels like this is still a building process and their own identity is still being worked out a little bit. Now, having said that, the one thing that they have done is that they've fought hard and they've won tight games, and so that's a good starting point to build your identity off. But who are they as a hurling team, and what do they have that they're going to fall back on when it comes to the challenge of facing Limerick this weekend?
Yeah, I think the one thing that they'll have going for them, Ger, is history. So you go back to the last couple of years. They brought them to, was it a point in the All-Ireland final? They brought them to 3 points in 2020 All-Ireland semi-final, 27 points to 24. So if there was one team over the last 5 or 6 years that has been consistently putting it up to this Limerick team, it has been Galway. And that I think going into a game, confidence, and some teams always have, they just have the number on another team. And it's hard to explain. If they went out to play, if the two teams went out to play one other team in the morning, one team could beat them by 20 points, the other team might only beat them by 5. But when they play each other, it seems to be always close. Go back to the 1980 final, which Galway beat Limerick, and again, the first time to win an All-Ireland in probably 50 or 60 years. I think it was 1923. So the one thing Galway have against Limerick, they have tradition, they have history, and I think that's what is all they have. You're asking me about what Shefflin probably brought. He has brought intensity, he has brought a consistent work rate and physicality to this Galway team, but he can't invent players, if you like. Got this Galway team, their main players are still the main players that were there in 2017 and 18. They're still the Dahi Burks, the David Burke, the Rowan McInerney, even though he's injured, the Joseph Coonies, Conor Whelan, Conor Cooney. They're still the spine of this team. So I think they can't just create a magical team overnight. It has to be coming in from an underage structure. And obviously there is young lads coming like Glennon and Tom Monaghan and Keenan Fahy. So there is young players coming, but the main players are still that older, 27, 28 to 30 age group. So I think how can Galway win this weekend? I think the fact that Limerick are raging hot favourites won't help Limerick as such, even though they're a seasoned team. But it'll still can lead to a little bit of complacency. And if Galway can turn up there with one of these performances of the ages, I think that's their only chance really of winning the semi-final, to be honest.
To kind of circle back to the first question there on these, about Limerick and semi-finals, do we just kind of read too much into what happened in 2019, the Kilkenny situation, and the sort of presumption that maybe they just got caught a little bit cold at the semi-final stage in a way that maybe they wouldn't have got caught in the final? And is that just the one thing you could potentially cling to this weekend?
I don't think they were caught that day, really, to be honest. They battled. Kilkenny went 9 or 10 points ahead early in that game, but they battled to the very end, and only for the sideline cut maybe they would have, was it a 65 or was it not a 65? It could have been a draw game. So I think a team that gets stunned is a team that maybe they just fall apart maybe in the last 15, 20 minutes because they weren't ready for it. I think they were ready for Kilkenny, and they love playing Kilkenny really because they see it as to beat them will be a major, feather in the cap there to win an All-Ireland. So if you look at that year, I think that was the third time they could possibly have beaten in championship that year. So I think it was just one of those years. But since then, they've just been an absolute machine. It's just victory after victory. Players missing one goes out, one comes in. They drop Aaron Galland, they pick someone else. Seamus Flanagan doesn't play one day, he's played the next. Like you look at the Munster final, for example, Clare, they marked all their top marquee players, kept them relatively quiet. Seamus Flanagan then steps up with 8 points from play. So I just think this Limerick team, their major advantage over everybody else is they rely on no one. Yes, they need, most of their players to chip in and that, like you would any team to win a match, but they don't rely on any one or two individuals. Each one of them nearly in the forward line are nearly match winners on their own. And as you said, injuries are starting to come back into it there now. And lucky enough for Limerick, it's not will they be out, it's will they be back. So these guys are nearly over their injuries. So Peter Casey is possibly going to be featured at some stage, and Cian Lynch. So that's coming into a team that is Munster champions. They're after winning 4 in a row in Munster. They're going for, I'd say this is to reach their 4th All-Ireland, is it, in 5 years. So listen, this Limerick team, they will have to be caught to be beaten in the semi-final, I think.
Or a sending off. That's the only other thing that you can see, an early red card that might swing the game. And like there has been a little bit of that in Limerick this year, so maybe that's something that happens that like is not planned for, but it levels things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I always find as well they focus on maybe team playing the edge when they're the champions or they're the favourites. Whereas if a team is the underdog, Ger, and they play like Limerick are playing, people are saying they're up for this game, they're fired up and they won't be bullied today. All these kind of phrases. Whereas when they're champions and you're doing it, it's cynicism, it's playing on the edge, it's, not focusing on the game. But this Limerick team does play like that. So listen, the way hurling is refereed now, the way the game is refereed, the way television cameras are being reviewing everything, you have podcasts, you have radio shows, reviewing everything all week. There is more pressure on referees that they can't just kind of, like, if you remember, Ger, us looking at hurling games, there was no yellow cards, right? So you book the lad and you send them off. But say if you book the lad in the first few minutes and then he, there was an innocuous foul maybe later on in the game, but he could pretend, listen, he's noting them down. Yeah. But now when you're giving you a knock off, if you like, but now if you get cards,
alongside the names in the diary on the All-Ireland final, were you also taking notes of who was calling your team cynical and that stuff as well?
You're on it, Ger, if that's what you're asking.
I don't think so. I think I was always a defender of that Kilkenny team. Come here, let's talk about Kilkenny then, right? I don't know what to expect from this game. I genuinely don't, because Clare have been one of the stories of the summer so far, and when everything goes well for them, they're absolutely majestic, and yet at the same time they're coming off the back of coming through the back door and the disappointment. And granted, I thought against Wexford it was like one of those trap games for them that they managed to navigate their way through, even though it required a little bit of good fortune. So do you feel great after something like that, or are you a little bit concerned? Are you a little bit tired? I don't know what the truth of that is. And I also don't know what the truth is about this Kilkenny team, because there could be a rising generation who are ready to take the mantle and be great hurlers for Kilkenny for the next 4 or 5 seasons, or they might just not be good enough and they can get found out in the semi-final. So every single one of those outcomes is on the cards for this one. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, well, going back to your first thing, I think it is a perfect situation for Clare. They played unbelievable in the Munster final and lost. Towards going into that match against Wexford, I did fear for him, to be honest, because I said it then and it's still in my mind. When you play really well and lose, you have everybody clapping in the back, telling you're a great lad, but you're still devastated because you lost and you can't get outside. But everyone is congratulating, saying, listen, you did us proud and you didn't let the jersey down. Towards when you lose and you play badly, well then you know it yourself. You don't need anybody to tell you, but they are probably, there's people criticising the team or criticising yourself. Listen, you're probably criticising yourself anyway, and you're hearing it probably, you might be hearing it directly, but you're probably hearing it indirectly. So it's easy then to be motivated for the next match, because every training you're just getting more ready and more ready. Towards this day now, they got over that match, right? So now going into this semi-final, they're going to be kind of under the radar. Nobody's talking about them as the hottest or favourite thing in the bookies. Is probably even enough in it against a Brian Cody Kilkenny team. So I think it's a perfect situation for Brian Lohan. And Brian Lohan, I'd say, would love to get one over on this Kilkenny team. Like, I was looking at the championship performance championship record between Kilkenny and Clare. Like when his team was at its peak, they beat Kilkenny in 1987. Then were beaten in 1999, beaten in 2004, beaten in 2006. So that Clare team, when they were at their peak, I suppose, they would love to get a few more victories over on Kilkenny. And Brian Lohan would be a proud Clare man, not from, I suppose, the traditional top three of Tipperary, Cork and Kilkenny. So any time to get a victory over them, or any time that you have a better team maybe than them, you want to be coming away with a victory. So I'd see huge motivation come from Brian Lohan on this one. I think he'll have these guys primed to beat Kilkenny. Like, you can imagine what's going on in that dressing room all week. This is Clare's chance to finally put one over on one of the big guns and get to an All-Ireland final. And I think it could be like, the Trilla Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. I think myself, this will be an epic Saturday night.
All right, that's our appetite is suitably wet. Do you think Kilkenny are going to win?
I think it's going to be so tight. They really do. I was looking at the players on both teams, Ger, right? You have Tony Kelly for Clare, you have TJ Reid for Kilkenny, you have Owen Cody for Kilkenny, Shane O'Donnell for Clare, you have Big Walter Welch for Kilkenny, Peter Duggan for Clare, Adrian Mullen scoring loads of points out around half-hour midfield for Kilkenny, Dave Fitzgerald is doing the very same for Clare, Paddy Deegan on the half-back line, inspirational for Kilkenny, David Mack on the other side for Clare, Hugh Lawler full-back has just been, after growing into an absolutely outstanding full-back for Kilkenny, but so is Conor Cleary for Clare. So, when you go through the players, kind of, man versus man, it looks like just an absolute enthralling encounter. And manager even versus manager, Cody versus Lohan, very similar type characters with huge standards and huge respect and authority. So it's going to be so close. It's hard to call it, but I'm going to go with, I know you listened to James Scahill's podcast with Will there and Paul there a few weeks ago, but I think it was before the Leinster final, and they asked James who was going to win. He said Galway, and Will was pushing and pushing, but why do you think? Because I just really, really want him to win. So I'm going to go with Kelly for the very same reason.
That's fair enough. That is fair enough. There's a strong possibility we end up in extra time certainly in this game, and who knows where that takes us. Would you be terribly surprised if this ended in a penalty shootout?
Jeez, I hope it doesn't, Ger. I absolutely hate penalty shootouts. Remember during COVID, I was in a petrol station in Kilkenny and met a father of a young fella. Now, during COVID, I could understand the penalty shootouts, because, you couldn't have replays of competitions and stuff like that. You were trying to keep crowds to a minimum and that. But I think his son was after missing, but under 14, so after missing a penalty and lost the fine, And I was just, this is heartbreaking, And so, these are amateurs and they have to go back to work. So they're not getting paid and rewarded for this risk of losing and getting, you're the one person that missed a penalty to lose an All-Ireland semi-final or lose the final. So I'd love if they went, and that's a fact. Imagine if that was your own son or brother or father or wife or girlfriend. It affects everybody. At least in a match, if you get maybe a point and if you miss a ball, but you could still probably blame 3 other players. Why did he let it past them? Why did the goalie miss that puck out in the first few minutes? Who made the mistake for the goal? You can still make a load of different excuses and blame other people. But in a penalty shootout, really, it's just you and whoever else missed. And even watching the football the weekend, I was hoping 3 or 4 lads had missed it so that one lad wouldn't get the blame,
Yeah.
So I love to see these penalty shootouts just finish them for that reason, because it's not like... say a professional, you might live in a place, but you might know the whole community. Towards in Ireland, you know everyone,
You're not getting out, yeah.
The flip side of that then is that Matthew Tierney will never have to buy a pint in Galway ever again.
Yeah, I know. It's tough.
Okay, so it's a Limerick Kilkenny All-Ireland final is what you're calling tentatively.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You have a shout out for us this week?
Yeah, the show this week, Ger, suppose awfully in the minor All-Ireland this weekend. It's in Nolan Park. Just remarkable from where they've come from. Michael Dignan has went back into Offaly as county board chairman, and it's just he's driving everything, football and hurling. Like a rising tide lifts all boats. There's a great saying, and like bringing busloads of children to matches. They're on social media during the COVID, during the lockdowns. They were just driving everything. Coaches, they have gone into schools, the coaches gone into clubs. I think just huge work on in underage, and they're now in an All-Ireland final this weekend. So the best of luck to them. But my shout this weekend goes back to the team, the great team, I suppose, of the 90s. The three Dooley brothers are my shout. Joe, Billy and Johnny. Just three amazing hurlers, and to have three of them coming out of one family, the one club. It's just such a credit to their own family, I suppose, and their own club. But I remember watching, I'd say it was the 94 All-Ireland. And I don't know, if anyone watching, there used to be a big poster, a big banner up on the hill. Yabba Dabba Dooley. It was always funny every time I see it. And even if you see reeling in the years running them now, it always brings you back to that time. And like Johnny Dooley, like, you know, probably changed, like say that great Limerick team that time, the great Waterford team, great players who were just so close not to win an All-Ireland. If Johnny Dooley hadn't to win for that 21, went for the goal, if he had to win for a point like he was supposed to, you know, Offaly's history might not be what it is today. They might not have won 94, they might not have won 98 either. So Johnny Dooley had a huge bearing, and he was already Brendan talking about him, and definitely around that time he would have been a lot of guys' favourite hurlers. Then I went on looking up play Shinty Railway Cup, and I was involved with Joe Dooley, the brother. And Joe had that magical day in the All-Ireland semi-final against Clare 1998. I think he scored 5 points from playing. He was probably 34, 35 at the time, but a great hurling man again, and loved me time with him. And you know, myself and Jackie Turrell and Hoggy and a few of them, we were there with Joe Dooley, and just a great hurling man as well, and brought huge, I suppose, you know, colour and passion. He was Offaly manager later on in his years, and I'm sure Billy, you can't forget Billy, because in that All-Ireland 94, 3 balls out to him, standing on the sideline, over the hurl, 3 points over the bar. And I thought, you know, if ever was a case for a corner forward not to be running around, it was Billy Dooley, stand over on the 21. And well, listen, Billy Dooley was, again, I was up in Sherkieran one time, and a great driving force in that club. Then through a friend of mine, Hughie Hannon, and Billy, you know, that's what you like to hear. He goes back to the club and he drives it on as well. So the three Dooley brothers, big shout out to them this week. And I suppose the Offaly era and the small, I suppose, hurling population there in general. Like you had the Borough team of the 90s that we all grew up looking at, 4 or 5 club All-Irelands, you know, the Hanafis, Brian Whelan, you know, just amazing hurlers. And John tried, then I met him at, there was a South Liberties Golf Classic there last weekend in Ballyneety, and I was lucky enough to meet, just shook hands with him, was all like John Try, and I didn't realise, I don't think we had met before, which is amazing. Like, and my memory of John Try would have been against Antrim. It's probably the semi-final of, it's probably 94, 95, I'd imagine, where the ball went and he flicked it back. You know, that Gerard Hegarty we see him do now, but this was even more exaggerated flick back into his hand and absolutely buried it. And you know, John Try, I think John Try, did I hear, won 3, either won 3 or played in 3 or 4 minor All-Irelands that time, which is,
he played goals as well, like the brother, as I think as a 15-year-old in the All-Ireland final, if memory serves.
As a 15-year-old, like they're amazing stories, like, you know. And so a big shout out to the Dooleys and all the lads.
One last thing about the Dooleys, all different styles, like completely not, you know, if you look like the Mars and Tipperary, very similar style. I would say the Walshes in Kilkenny, fairly similar style, but the Dooleys are they're like 3 completely different hurlers. One, the ultimate stylish, one, the corner forward, who is like letting everybody, let the ball do the work for him, and then the other one is just an absolute marauding battler with like an ability, octopus arms, to score points off either side. And try and run the game from 11. It's a completely different individuals and characteristics.
Yeah, and isn't that great? Because, you know, when you're looking at teams, say for a young player going up, do I need to be as big as Gerard Hegarty? Do I need to be as stylish as TJ Reid? Do I need to be, you know, as clinical as Aaron Gillan? No, you can just be yourself. These are 3 guys from the one family, the one, you know, one genetics, and they're 3 different hurlers, but they still made it, and we're still heroes and scored vital scores, and we're part of a great team for many years. So you're 100% right there, Jerry. Yeah.
Good stuff. Tommy, enjoy the games this weekend. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Yeah. Look, thank you. Bye.
Tommy Walsh giving us his thoughts ahead of the All-Ireland Hurling semi-finals this weekend, which have definitely been overshadowed up to this point in the week.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the calendar as well, is that you're not going to have these long run-ins into these games. I think it probably will also kind of dampen the fallout from the football a little bit as well. Tomorrow probably goes full preview mode, doesn't it, for a semi-finals weekend?
Maybe, yeah. Okay, we're moving on. We're sticking with the GAA because we're joined now by former Cork minor hurler Eoin Cadogan as he previews the Electric Ireland GAA Minor Hurling Championship final between Tip and Offaly. It's in a couple of minutes' time, actually. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to tell you what's... I'm going to read these comments for you. Tommy's a legend and so approachable, I'd imagine, says Frank. Come on, Limerick. Tommy Walsh has no equals, says N. Cren. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. Nigel Mansell has OTB Gold at 1 o'clock. Dadcast is from 3. Our career retrospective is Michael Owen at 4. OTB Gold is Joe meets Ruby Walsh at 6. And then the show tonight is live from 7 with Joe as usual. We're back after these with Cork GAA's Eoin Cadogan.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Marginal gains, XG, top speed, recovery. What's it all about? Want to improve but don't know where to start? With more data than ever now available, OTB Sports have teamed up with Whoop to cut through the noise and help you raise your game, no matter the sport. OTB Sports are delivering the metrics that matter. Meaningful metrics in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. Follow OTB Sports social channels for the best insights and stats this season.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match, because somewhere out there there's someone for you, and GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Okay, so the Electric Ireland GAA Minor Hurling Championship reaches its conclusion this weekend. The final between Tipperary and Offaly on Sunday the 3rd of July. Tickets for the match, which throws in at 1:30 in UPMC Nolan Park, are available for purchase at ga.ie/tickets. TG Carr are airing the match live with coverage starting at 1 o'clock. And I'm delighted to say former Cork minor hurler, amongst other things, Eoin Cadogan is with us. Eoin, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning lads, how are you?
Yeah, good. Tommy Walsh was just on there pointing out how much of a revolution it is for Offaly to have a team in the All-Ireland Minor Hurling final, and if there is going to be a second or third coming of Offaly Hurling, then this is where it really needs to start with the underage groups, and whatever work they're doing in Offaly at underage level, it's really starting to bear fruit.
Yeah, it's pretty evident, I suppose, even if you look back to last year's under-20 All-Ireland football success and now to be another All-Ireland final at minor level. It's as clear as day that the work that's been put in at ground level and by Michael Duignan, I suppose, is quite progressive, one. And two, they've identified that we need up-and-coming players to be getting to semi-finals, finals, not alone competing but winning. And ultimately that builds confidence within the county, within the supporters, and most importantly within the players. So it's a massive achievement to have another team in an All-Ireland final against Tipperary. And I suppose I've seen it first hand myself at underage level. Tipperary have won under 21s minor titles, so it should make for a cracking game.
Tommy and Joe were also chatting around siblings and how some households can be very similar, some households can be very different. Are the Cadogan brothers similar hurlers or very, very different?
Very, very different. I would describe Alan as the greyhound in the family. He's got the speed, always needs to be ready to go, whereas I'm a bit like a donkey, just get out, get it done. Play full back, so that says enough about it, doesn't it?
Well, I was going to say, because the point was the Tipperary Mars are very similar, and I would have said Tommy and Pádraig Walsh fairly similar, certainly similar levels of flexibility. I guess Alan just grew up marking you in the back garden. Is that how you were the back and he was the forward?
Well, Alan used to come to all the minor training sessions. He used to come to all the 21 training sessions. And when I first started with Cork in the senior squad, he used to come to the ball alley with us. He used to come down and puck the balls out from behind the goal. So he wouldn't ever say very much, but for sure he was definitely taking it all in, because he certainly made his own stamp in terms of the standards that he bears for himself, his ability to win his own ball independently, and I suppose that reflected last week when he did get a chance against Galway.
Yeah, and I suppose if he was coming up against you, in fairness, to win the ball, you'd have to get out in front. And even then,
I can tell you this, there was a few times during our club training sessions, and even after some of the Cork training sessions, internal games, that there wasn't a whole pile of talk at the dinner table when we came home. But it was pretty quick to pick up on it too, I can tell you.
Well, you got to drive the standards however they come. We weren't sure whether or not to talk to you about the football last weekend or the hurling this weekend, so we may as well. We've started with the hurling. If you were playing this weekend, who would you most be looking forward to picking up on? And that's this Limerick team, for example. If in the week in training, if the manager was taking you sides, okay, your job this weekend is going to be X. Who would you most be looking forward to marking?
I don't know. Looking forward to marking any of those Limerick fellas would be the right description. I've been lucky enough to be taxed with, I suppose, marking plenty of different ones there. Tom Morrissey, Aaron Gillan, Garrod Hegarty, and they all bring their own, I suppose, one, physical attributes, and two, obviously the skill level that they have is immense. I think from a defender's perspective that they're so in sync with each other, and they have such an understanding of even their runs for puckouts. Like it's very well done. Like everyone thinks that Nicky Quaid is orchestrating things, but Nicky Quaid is actually hitting the best option at the right moment based off the types of runs that they're doing, and they know exactly what they're doing. There's no potluck with the puckouts. Like even in last year's All-Ireland final, I remember at one stage Tom Morrissey, Cian Lynch and Garrod Hegarty all had gone to the opposite 65 and were trotting back to the position, so we were waiting to pick them up. And they were just looking at each other, and I knew damn well that there was something happening. And before you knew it, Cian Lynch had blocked the run. Tom Morrissey had made a run laterally, which you thought was going the whole way, and then he peeled around the back and got the ball in over the top. Like, so very, very smart individuals. I think out of all the fellas I've had plenty of battles with would probably be Aaron Gillan. I said it once I retired. He's a massively physically imposing player, and you don't typically get that from forwards usually, but if you want to mix it with him, he'll mix it back, and ultimately he'll do damage when it's needed most in terms of scoring goals and points. And he's a top class forward. He loves defending puckouts and winning dirty ball as much as getting scores, and I think that's as a whole, as a group. So they're just a top class side. They're outstanding, and if I was the guest right now, I see them being in the All-Ireland final based off what I've seen today from Galway in the Leinster final and obviously against Cork last week. Yeah,
no, I think that's fair enough, and they're definitely the favourites to do so. Can you just take us back to that? So you're on the field, and the three lads are. So your defence is on kind of your own 45. Is that where?
Yeah. So I suppose they're coming back after filtering back the field, and as they're coming back, obviously it's something to do with either their positioning or after maybe 65 after a free, they have set runs, and that one from Tom Morrissey in behind. Once these guys get in behind you early, you're in trouble because they're so good in there. And I think you'll see that from Tom Morrissey when he caught that ball against Clare, wasn't it? Clare, and offloaded to Ger Eoin. It's where they're in behind you when they're most dangerous. Same with Aaron Gillan. When the ball is coming in there, he likes to swivel in around behind you, and as a defender, you just can't leave that happen. I'd much prefer to have those guys in my eyesight in front of me than to have them in behind me, because that's when they're most dangerous.
The other thing is, it feels like certainly when you're watching them and when you're at matches, you can see the space that they create and how quickly they realise a goal is on. There's a ruthlessness about going for goals, which sometimes they beat you with 27 points and they don't need to do the goal thing. But there's always this kind of, I guess as a defender, there must be a constant tension, like 2 steps the wrong direction, and they're going to feel like they have just enough space to get a pass away for somebody else to be in space, and therefore it's going to be in the back of your net, and it's that fast.
Yeah, and I suppose if I know a lot of things obviously went wrong in last year's All-Ireland final, and the score was very evident of that. But earlier in the year, in the Munster Championship, we decided to push hard on them in their half-forward line on Garrett Hegarty, Tom Morrissey and Keane Lynch. And we actually got quite a bit of success, but the catch-22 in pushing hard in their half-forward line is that it creates so much space in behind, and you're selling out your full-back line, in my opinion, if you do that. And even though we negated the half-forward line, they created oodles of goal chances by runners bypassing us. And they, again, like all excellent teams, they're able to adapt to the situation in front of them, and they knew that we were pushing hard on them. So the runs were nearly with fierce intent, but there was no real meaningful for actually getting the ball. They would just drag you out of position knowing you were going to follow. So they have danger on the outside line, they have danger on the inside line. Their halfbacks can score. I think Dimmer Burns got 9 points in the last game. So they can score from everywhere. So, and the system doesn't change. Typically the personnel doesn't change. So it's worked for them, and it's still working for them, and you'd have to take your hat off to them.
In retrospect, is there anything you could have done differently in last year's All-Ireland final that would have had a significant influence on the outcome?
Obviously Keane Lynch's I suppose what he contributed that day in terms of possessions, spreading the ball, rather than possibly holding our lines, we should have possibly man-marked him. And if you really wanted to, I suppose, this is a very negative word, the sweeper, we possibly should have filtered one back in behind and allowed our centre-back to push hard on him. Obviously then you have a protection in numbers, it creates a bit of space, and I suppose it might be something slightly different that Limerick mightn't have been used to. But again, hindsight is easy to talk about, lads. We went into that All-Ireland final really, really feeling that we had a chance. Anytime I've played them over the last couple of years, I've always felt that we had the capability of beating them, especially after 2019, above in the Gaelic rounds. No, you can say that's a once-off, and it was a once-off, but I suppose there's, you know exactly what you're going to get from them. It's can you match it, one, and getting goals against them is critical if you have any hope of beating them.
So, say if in an alternate universe you were the man who was asked to man-mark Keane Lynch in that situation, what can you do? Well, like, tell us all the tricks of the trade that you would be pulling out to try and quell the guy who's been referred to as the Messi of hurling.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he is. I suppose I'm a realist. Like I understand my limitations. I understand what I was good at as a player. I suppose there's fierce clarity in being told to push on a man because you have to be tight all the time, and if you're not, then you're not doing your job correctly. I suppose as a defender, you're essentially trying to negate someone. You're trying to stop what they're doing all the time. You're trying to stop what they're good at and what they enjoy doing, and that's typically what forwards doing, like taking scores, moments of brilliance. Your job as a defender is to really stop that influence. And I think that if you had pushed a bit harder on him and possibly sat one back in between, it might have been different. But again, hindsight is an easy thing. But like you're dealing, as you said, the Messi of hurling. Like he can do things with his wrists and his hands. Like his ability to move the ball out of those contact areas where there's 3 and 4 trying to close him down, and next thing the ball is out, and you're under even more pressure because you've got runners coming wide then heading straight for goal, and no better boys than Ger Eoin and Tom Morrissey to break the line, create the opportunity. If it's on to finish, they will, but they're unselfish to be able to pass it off too. So
or Kyle Hayes from deep, or who knows where he starts. But yeah, and that's the problem. Even when you were talking earlier on about when you went tight on them as a half back line, they just run out the field. They've got the brain power as well as the physical attributes and the hurling skill. They also have the brain power to recognise, okay, that's what you were doing, we'll just do this to counteract it. It is a very high level they're operating at. But I guess the point about these questions is that it's not just hindsight, that like Shefflin this week and his backroom team have the opportunity to plot something. Is there anything that Galway have that give them a sense that actually, you know what, we match up really well against these in these areas, and so therefore this is going to be a much tighter game than people are thinking, and it's not going to be 6 points, it's going to be in the melting pot at the end, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'd be interested because obviously I was a very close spectator to last weekend's game between Cork and Galway, and I suppose what was noticeable was they were isolating Conor Whelan essentially on a 1v1, and everyone else was after pulling out the field. Limerick typically don't follow. So like even Tony Kelly getting 12, 14, 16 scores, they don't really care. Like they believe that by holding their shape, working the ball through the lines, that inevitably if you want to go for a shootout, we're going to beat you every time. If they do isolate Conor Whelan with 45 yards of space either side, where does Barry Nash go? Where does Sean Finn go? Will they hold? Will they push? One might push and one might stay. I think Galway have all the physical attributes to be able to compete physically with them. My concern would be that, like that scenario where I described Cian Lynch moving the ball out of the tight contact zones in between the two middle thirds, I think Limerick have the capability just to get it out of there quick. So regardless how big and physical you are, they just have the hurling smarts to get it out of where you don't want it to be to the wings and then deliver long diagonal ball. Like Galway had 2 sweepers back at different stages in the first half against Cork, and Cork probably their half hurling played slightly too deep because it allowed 2 sweepers to sit in front of Alan Connolly and Tim O'Mahony, and that's just inevitably that's impossible to break down in terms of long balls in, because Dahi Burke will have the smarts to get the ball to the ground, play set up, and away they go. Like, so it'll make for interesting viewing for sure, but I purely based on what I've seen this year, I just can't see them being beaten.
All right.
Just being honest.
Oh, good stuff. Great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million for your time. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, guys.
It's Cork's own Cadogan there. A reminder, tickets for the Electric Ireland GA Minor Hurling Championship final between Tip and Offaly on this Sunday are available to purchase at ga.ie/tickets. TG Carr will be airing the match live with coverage starting at 1 o'clock. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're back tomorrow morning from 7:30 where we'll have live reaction to Ireland's game with the Maori All Blacks. Deal or No Deal is back, plus much more besides. Right now, we're leaving you with the Irish Independent rugby journalist Rory O'Connor on last night's Monday Night Rugby. Enjoy.
Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent here in studio. Hello.
Hey Joe, how you doing?
I'm very well. So there is a COVID outbreak in the New Zealand setup. They are without their head coach Ian Foster. They are without their forwards coach John Plumtree. They are without their defence specialist Scott McLeod. They are without David Havili and Jack Goodhue. And so into the breach. Welcome back.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. The smiling assassin Joe Schmidt is back and he's leading the All Blacks this week, and Ireland have had, it was one of those nights, I would normally be down in New Zealand covering these things. I'm back at home this year. I was watching the Sunday game last night where the email came through from the All Blacks, and I think most Irish people probably would have missed it because they were watching the fallout of Armagh and Galway, such as the summer tour life. And by the time I woke up, Ireland had ruled Mac Hansen has COVID. Rob Herring and Ian Henderson have gone for scans, and all this stuff had happened at the All Blacks as well. The Maoris named their team. It was like, God, this is going to be fun. You're going to wake up every morning and things are going to be happening. But the big overriding news line is that Joe Schmidt is running the show for the All Blacks this week. I presume Ian Foster's picking the team remotely and dialing into meetings from afar, the head coach. But there is a familiar, when Andy Farrell looks across at the All Blacks coaching box on Saturday, there will be a familiar face smiling back at him, and a man who knows everything there is to know about Irish rugby. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Schmidt has watched every minute of every game the Irish players have played since he's left. I think he knows he would have retained that interest since he's left, and he, I think, was probably, even though it was an unspoken thing, was probably involved in the preparations for this anyway. But this gives him a much more central role and makes life so much more interesting now as we build up to this first test. And we don't know if he'll be involved centrally for the second and third when Foster returns, but if things go well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why not? Do you want to stay around for a couple of weeks, Joe? We'll put you up in the hotel and get your insights. Like, it's really, I think it's brilliant. It's just adds another layer to what was already something I was looking forward to.
I feel like he's gone to his archive and opened the folder marked my most special favourite plays and set piece moves and said, I'm going to dust you off and unleash hell here. And
absolutely. And also is, I'm sure the New Zealand media chief was given a list of news websites and journalists to add to his portfolio this week, and get the full reports. I'm sure suddenly, like, if he wasn't doing it already, if you think about it, Mac Hansen's out this week. It's going to be Keith Earls or Jordan Larmour on the right wing. Joe Schmidt knows these players so intimately. He's going to be in Richie Mwanga or Jordan Barrett's ear about their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like, he gave Jordan Larmour his debut. He gave Keith Earls most of his best days. He knows exactly. He would have prepared them in such a different way. To try and hide those weaknesses in the past. he knows everything there is to know about these Irish players. It's an incredible. It's not just because he coached them. He's also that mind that we all know about, and he has the best player. Not necessarily best players anymore, but it's like some of the most talented athletes in the world to work with.
Yeah.
If you were neutral, it'd be very exciting. If you're an Irish player, it's a bit daunting, a little bit.
Just to chart Schmidt post 2019. So he retired from coaching post 2019.
Finished coaching was the term.
Finished. Okay.
Yeah, there was never.
It's like a boxer who retires 10 times in their career. It was never going to stay away from coaching.
It was a very interesting worded statement that they released the day after he was named Coach of the Year at the end of that glorious 2018. He said he was going to finish coaching. It never was clear what it meant, and he was asked to clarify a few times, and he always left the door that little bit ajar.
Okay.
It wasn't a retirement. It wasn't leaving the Irish job. He was going to finish coaching. So he hasn't held a de facto coaching role since. He's been more of a consultant type figure, even though apparently he's been taking sessions in the Auckland Blues. But he's, true to his kind of the way he kind of operates, he hasn't actually coached in the kind of truest sense of it. He's kind of found a parameter that he can work in that didn't betray what he said that day.
These semantics. I mean, if someone said to you,
it's just bringing it all back.
I'm finishing up work, you'd assume they're retiring.
Well, it's like if I said I'm finished journalism and then signed for the Irish Times the following week, I mean, it's similar to doing that. You'd expect me to go and get a job in PR. If I said I was finished journalism, but he's found he helped out at Claremont. Then he went into the World Rugby, and he became the director of rugby in World Rugby. And I think
that was a big job there in World Rugby, wasn't it?
It was, but I think Joe Schmidt always liked the tracksuit element of coaching, being on the pitch, and I think the politics of that job probably wore him down a bit. Plus, during COVID, he was staying in Dublin, and then World Rugby are based here, and he moved back to Auckland during COVID and decided to stay, as far as I'm aware. And that's a combination of those two factors saw him choose to leave World Rugby at that point, and he was then co-opted onto the Auckland Blues coaching ticket as I couldn't tell you what the term, you maybe have it there. He's an advisor. It's an advisory role to Liam MacDonald. Suddenly they were brilliant. Now they have very good players. They've always had very good players, but they got to the final of Super Rugby this year, played unbelievable rugby along the way. Bowden Barrett was apparently bending at the knee to kind of learn everything he could get from him. He's the starting out half for the Blues. Now they ultimately were undone in the final by the Crusaders, who absolutely obliterated them in the final, took apart every strength of their game, a little bit like maybe the World Cup quarter-final when things went the ground. But he had a very positive influence there, and now after this tour, he's supposed to be taking over from Grant Fox as what they call an independent selector. So he is kind of a voice to help Ian Foster in the selection room, where he's not actually in a kind of a player. It's not a role we have in Irish rugby, but he's a kind of not a player-facing influence, but he is part of the selection meetings. But I think if you know Joe Schmidt, and I think most Irish people have a good idea of how he operates, it wouldn't be long before he would be getting involved. And Foster apparently wants him to be involved because he respects him so much, and he's trying to fight for his job. And Schmidt isn't the threat. It's Scott Robertson who's the threat. He's the Crusaders coach, and that's the political background for this in New Zealand. The New Zealand fans are not sold on this coaching ticket. They want another guy. So Foster's kind of fighting for his life, and Schmidt may be the white knight.
Because I was reading with the Blues, for instance, when he arrived, it was, as you said, more in a consultancy type role. But I was reading, I haven't seen this, but I was reading pretty quickly, he was in his tracksuit taking the warm-ups pre-game, in much the same way he took the warm-ups for Ireland. That suggests very hands-on.
And if you have Joe Schmidt as part of your organisation, you get him on the pitch, because he is, one of the best coaches in the game, if not in the history of the game. I know things went sour with Ireland, but the things he achieved here, both here and at Leinster and at Claremont, and the respect that he has across the board, he's a phenomenal coach. So if you have him in the Auckland Blues, and you have him as your kind of strategist, I mean, he'd probably do a good job there as well, because he is a very intelligent man, but you really want him imparting the detail to him. So that's how we understand it. But then when it went to the coaching box, it was Liam MacDonald and his coaching team. But it would be a surprise if Joe wasn't wired in somewhere and having some influence, because he's far more experienced than those people, and has they would respect him to that. Like they will become better coaches because they've worked with Joe. So people are willing to bring him on board in that regard. And he doesn't want that front face. He doesn't want to do the media. He doesn't want that part of it. It's a bit like Stuart Lancaster at Leinster. I think it probably suits him to be in that kind of Kaiser Soze style role, where he gets in and out without having to do any of the stuff he hated doing when he was the Ireland coach.
Interesting. And the upturn in the Blues' fortunes coincided in a fairly concrete way with his arrival.
Yeah, they were getting better. They have a very good roster of players. They have some of the best athletes, and like Auckland, the players that are produced in the a little bit like the Leinster academy. Like Auckland is the biggest population in New Zealand, and when you tap into that, you'll get great players. They signed Bowden Barrett, and they have an incredible forward pack, and I didn't see an awful lot of Super Rugby this year. I had watched them in previous years and they were exciting to watch, but there was always a soft underbelly, and that actually got exposed in the final. But they were more solid, their winning return was much better, and they played exceptional rugby at times. So that's the Schmidt effect.
So Schmidt due anyway, once the Irish tour was over, to come on board officially as independent selector and analyst, I saw as well. Again, these are suitably vague terms. So I think his first match as part of the setup was going to be South Africa in the Super Rugby Championship. But you said there you suspect he was feeding in information already in advance of this tour.
Yeah, well, he's part of the system now. So once you're in the New Zealand system, it's a very aligned system, and Ian Foster has his number, and it would be remiss of him not. I mean, Rout was in with Ireland this week, so not in a tactical sense, but almost in a kind of a cultural sense to try and prepare them for playing the Maori. So everyone's talking to everyone. But if he's on the New Zealand rugby payroll and he's joining the team after this, he probably feels. I mean, he's an Irish citizen. He's worked with these Irish players. He probably felt like it was a nice way to avoid being the focus in this couple of weeks. It's come about a different way anyway. He was on the Breakdown, that New Zealand show, or maybe it was a different show. I listened to a podcast a while ago, and he was saying, I'm too busy, I'm hosting a lot of Irish fans who are coming over, they're staying in my house, I have to entertain them, I wouldn't be able to get involved. Very much the late side of Joe, where he was kind of that happy-go-lucky. But you know that he's a proud New Zealander. He's part of the system now, and his job is to help them get better. Yes. And he will be giving them. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would suspect, and the word is that he has. It's kind of an open secret that he has been to some degree involved.
A word on Foster and his security of tenure. So beaten by France and Ireland in November, and beaten by South Africa as well last year. 3 defeats in a calendar year. That does not happen to New Zealand very often. Is he a shoo-in to make it to the World Cup as coach? They're not afraid to make a late turn in the road.
They have a model, and their model is to be a lot of continuity and a lot of cohesion, and that's the model that rugby has followed for an awful long time. And then Rassie Erasmus just ripped it up. He took over 18 months out and won the World Cup. So suddenly there's an example there of someone who has a resource-heavy rugby nation, loads of really good players, and who can whip them into shape in 18 months and go and win the World Cup. New Zealand, the pool of players is not as strong now as it was under Steve Hansen. Steve Hansen got out at a pretty good time. Still very, very good. And there is an outstanding candidate who Foster beat to the job in Scott Robertson, who's the former All Black who coaches the Crusaders. People might have seen him breakdancing after the final. It's his thing that he does every year. He worked with Ronan O'Gara. He's talked in the studio about how excellent he is as a coach. I've met him. He's a really impressive figure.
Charismatic figure.
Very popular.
Yeah.
Whereas Foster, although quite humorous and stuff, is quite... what we've seen has been more dour continuity candidate, a bit like Farrell. He took over after the World Cup. He's been part of the All Blacks for a long time. He's been institutional. He's an NZRU man. Scott Robertson's more the kind of rogue outsider in people's eyes. He's winning. They play really good rugby. They've won another title. I think 6 in a row he's won with the Crusaders. They're the best. I mean, with people talking about Leinster being the best, like the Crusaders are the best in the world at what they do. So there is if the Ireland tour goes badly and then the Rugby Championship goes badly, there is an argument to be made that Foster will be removed and Robertson will come in. New Zealand
as opposed to Schmidt.
Yeah, I think Schmidt wouldn't have the kudos of Robertson. Schmidt, the NZRU might prefer to move Schmidt in. Whether Joe would want to do that or not, I don't know. It looks like he's now part of Foster's thinking for the World Cup. And again, it probably suits Joe to have that advisory analyst role where he's on the pitch, he's in the coaching box, but he's not in front of the cameras, he's not doing the media stuff. He'll do it every so often at his own discretion, but he's not the guy all the time.
I wonder about the ego of that. I mean, would Joe Schmidt not want to be the guy? Head coach in New Zealand, is that not the ultimate dream job?
See, I don't know if I always wondered if Joe, because he was so he used up so much energy wondering, not being able to control the outside factors about what people were saying about his team. If he was the head coach and people in New Zealand Herald, who were New Zealand media, for all of its reputation, is quite favourable towards the team, and they keep them on side very well, and they kind of go after the touring side. We might see it in the next couple of weeks. They'll go after Ireland if things are going badly. But still, it's a lot of focus. Like Steve Hansen talked about, like paparazzi turning up in the back garden. Joe's a very private person. He kept the media at a distance when he was the coach. He was very good at it. Like, he's very able to do it. We've seen, like, he's charming when he wants to be, and he's ruthless at the same time. But I always wondered if this was a better, like, he would get the kudos within the game from the people he respects. Now, he wouldn't get the love of the he's always talked about the white van man who'd roll out his window and say thank you, Joe, as he walked around, and how that made him feel so special. Like, he probably wouldn't get that. But I don't know in your home country if he wants that. It's such a high profile job. Ireland, for all of we've come up in the world as a rugby nation, it's still the fourth sport. He was a massive figure, but he could still probably go about his business a bit more. I think in Auckland it's more difficult. Hard to know. Like, I mean, maybe I'm underselling that ego side of things, but I think it works for him. I don't know. He's ruthless. He's a top man. Maybe when he gets his handle on things and he kind of goes, well, this isn't working, and then Enzo or you ask him what's happening, and he goes, well, I think I could do a better job. Maybe that plays out that way. I'm not sure at this stage, but he's he's a storyline. Maybe he didn't want to be a storyline before that, but he is the big storyline going into this week, certainly in this part of the world.
He sure is. So it remains to be seen if Foster will be well enough to be in the coach's box Saturday.
Yeah, we just depends on when he tests positive. We were back in Lions tour, COVID stuff. It feels weird. Like, to be honest, at this stage, most Irish teams, if someone had COVID, they just didn't. They said he was ill, or we kind of stopped. It wasn't bringing down games since the European stuff, and they might say he had COVID and he was gone. It kind of became just a thing, whereas now it feels like it's threatening the whole tour again.
Well, three players with it. I mean, if it's spreading, it's spreading, and we don't have much wiggle room with this tour.
No.
Eden Park first up.
Yeah.
I only heard that the other day. Because Eden Park is traditionally the last stop for a touring party like this, and they are famously unbeaten there since '94.
Yes. Yeah. And they played the Lions there twice in 17 because they wanted to win it so much. They brought. It's also the biggest stadium they have.
This is the most complimentary thing they have ever done towards Irish rugby. This is incredible.
And they sold it out as well, which is another massive compliment, because you always wondered. 2012, I'd say it had to be quite a marketing push to get the bums on seats, because Ireland didn't have the respect. Whereas now, Ireland have beaten 3 times in the last 5 games, and they are more recognised. The players are more familiar to the New Zealand public because they have their attention. It's undeniable that is the case, but it also makes it sweeter to beat them. So,
and is this is to offset the general thinking, and we're maybe kind of feeling backwards for old generalisations, but the general feeling, well, Eden Park last, most difficult to beat, and they're at their most vulnerable in the first test. Yeah. So let's offset that by going to Eden Park first. That's the reading of it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Eden Park factor, I think, can be overplayed. Lions drew there in 2017. They won the World Cup final there, but France should have won that day. It wasn't Eden Park got them over the line. It was the referee. I don't think the venue. Home advantage matters more than that actual venue. I know we can build up the mystique, and that fact is a fact, and it's undeniable. They do move an awful lot of their games around. They don't lose at home very often either way. Whether they do it in Eden Park or in one of the other 2 venues, it's going to be an outstanding achievement to pull it off.
Yeah.
But it is. You're right. Like, it does show that maybe they want to front load the third series. They want to get ahead. They see this as a series. Like, it's not a set of individual tests that they're going to win, which they would normally they'll get overlooked. They now see it as a legitimate test series where there is a risk that Ireland can win, and they want to stay in their. I mean, one of the other things they have, the Super Rugby final was only two weeks ago, so they've a very short lead in. So actually basing the team in Auckland, getting them all together probably helps as well in their traditional way. So there's a few things at play. But then they're weakened by the fact that potentially their starting centres are out. Certainly one of those 2 would have played. Havili, I think, came off the bench in Dublin in 2021, and Goodhue was injured, but he's their main man in midfield. So that means they have much less experience in that area, a very pivotal area where Ireland are really, really strong. So there are, and we just don't know. Like, we may wake up tomorrow and more players are gone. This
is the thing. And so, will injuries and then COVID notwithstanding, which are both very unpredictable across the next 3.5 weeks, would you have a sense of which test is most winnable from an Irish perspective?
Well, Ireland should be targeting winning the series. Like, it's not,
should be winning the series.
Should be targeting winning the series. Well,
if they win one, is that not a great success on New Zealand soil? Is that not another?
Depends which one you win. I think if you win the first one and then you lose the series, it's history. But I was in South Africa in 2016 when they won the first one, and they realised South Africa were vulnerable and they couldn't get over the line. They should have won that series. And they were making a documentary. It was a sponsored documentary, and basically the documentary didn't mention. It was basically the line at the end that Ireland went on to lose the second. It was all about the first game. Whereas I actually contributed to the footage for the third test. They'd done the whole documentary for the whole thing, but they just decided, no, we're just going to focus on the win.
They cut out your starting role, hammering the
absolutely, team. Absolutely, yeah. No, but I thought that team was actually was really under in comparison to this team. It was much less strong. Like Johnny Sexton wasn't there, loads of starters missing. My point is that once you get over there, it's all framed by the context of what happens over there. If you win the first test, then you should go on to win the series. Like, yes, when you look back on the cold light of day, one win in New Zealand, one test win and beating the Maoris twice is a decent return in a kind of a cold hard facts on a ledger, yes. But really, you're going over there to win. This is a team Ireland have beaten 3 times in the last 5 years. They're at a low ebb. Their high ebbs are pretty high and they haven't come that far. Ireland are coming off the back of a very, a reasonably successful season. They've got nearly everyone on deck, and New Zealand suddenly have a crisis in the ranks. There is massive upheaval. I mean, why? Like, the odds are they should be winning one.
Yeah, I know.
They should be picking off one, and like
one for me is a success.
At what point do we stop being plucky underdogs? Like, at what point? Like, I know this is the last, this in the quarterfinal, or the last piece of history that Irish rugby have to make. But they if they've anything about them, if they want to win a World Cup, which they say they do, they can't be going over there thinking 1 out of 3 is good enough.
Okay. Because I was going to put it to you, if you take England 03, South Africa in 19, and then Australia in both 91 and 99, they managed to win once in New Zealand the season prior, very famously. Yeah. And once was just fine.
England only played once, though.
Fair point.
Like, series has only came back recently, and they're brilliant. I love them, and they're gone again after this, and I really think they're missed. So they take on a dynamic. Like, a load of these Irish players were over there in 17 with the Lions, and like, New Zealand were very human on that tour. Now, they needed a red card to win. A very dodgy decision at the end of the third test to come up, to draw that game, because they should have lost it really. But Ireland have more cohesion than the Lions. They might not have the same level of great players across the board, but they have cohesion. Like, I'm not being bullish about it. Like, I do think there's massive problems in the Irish ranks. Like, I think the Tyke Furlong's injury is a massive concern to me. The depth beneath him is an issue. Same at loosehead prop. Ronan Kelleher and now Rob Herring. That's big. That's leaving a lot of weight on Dan Sheehan's shoulder. That's your front row. And what was the difference last November? It was Ireland's tight 5. Ian Henderson, I think, is a big underrated component of that tight 5. When he's fit, he's really important to this team. James Ryan's form's not great. That's your tight 5 undermined. That's a big problem. So I'm not being ridiculously bullish. I do think there are things that Ireland have to overcome to get there, and it could go horribly wrong. There is one of those countries where if things start to go wrong, it could go horribly wrong. And the Maoris could soften them up this week. They could lose one more due to COVID. And they're at the end of a long season, and the weather might come in down in Dunedin, and suddenly things are looking a lot less appealing. So it's not. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I just think that's what they should be aiming towards, because there are things they need to overcome.
So Tainat Hooker, obviously this week in particular, given that they started without Ronan Kelleher, and then Rob Herring is having a scan. Niall Scannell arrives tomorrow. So for the Maori game on Wednesday, they have 2 fit hookers. Dave Heffernan presumably now will start. At the time of us recording, we don't have the team, and Dan Sheahan will get as few minutes as possible, potentially, as in do not get injured for the weekend.
You'd think they wouldn't put Scannell on the bench if he's only just landed, but I think David Wallace did it for the Lions at one stage, and they might just go, right, Dave Heffernan, you're going 80 here, that's
Sheahan and
kind of. I mean, if they lose Sheahan, they're in real trouble. I mean, and Sheahan, like Rob Herring and Ronan Kelleher, are their 2 best scrummaging hookers, and that's where they're big. That's where my big fear about this Irish team is at the moment. And New Zealand don't have the scrum to really undermine them in the way that South Africa, France, or England do. But they do have, they have picked their scrummaging props rather than they've picked Tuanafaki, who's going to France next year. Like, he'd normally be bombed out, but they've picked him in the squad. He's probably going to start at loosehead. Like, he's not a great player, but he's a good scrummager, so they're going to go after him there. Greg Feeks, the former Irish scrum coach, he's still in camp, and he knows everything there is to know about these players as well, so there's a lot of intel there, so they may go after them in that area. Like, hooker's a real area of concern. Like, front row depth is an issue in Irish rugby at the moment. It's not really going to be fixed between now and the World Cup. They've high hopes for Tom O'Toole on the tight head side, but if anything happens to Furlong, they're left to Finlay Bealham and Tom O'Toole, who really don't have a huge amount of experience at this level, so that's a big risk. So that is the area I think where Ireland could come a cropper. But you've got your Joe McCarthy's in the second row, might come good. You've got Ryan Baird, who could really cut loose on a tour like this. You've got players who could step up, but it's a bit more of an unknown than, say, a fully fit Porter Furlong outside Kelleher, with Sheahan coming off the bench with a real impact. Then you've got, Henderson and Ryan with Tadhg Byrne coming on, fit Tadhg Byrne. That's a type 5, that can cope with the All Blacks and could dominate. Whereas now that strength is undermined. They might have to find a different way.
To Wednesday then, 8:05 Irish time in Hamilton, the Maori All Blacks game. I see TJ Pernara's on the bench. He was a surprise admission from the main squad. Brad Weber, who has 17 New Zealand caps, starts at 9. 10 debutants. It's been talked about as a mix of experience and the rising stars of Super Rugby. We don't have the Irish team yet, so it's difficult maybe to answer this with complete knowledge or certainty. But what are you expecting from these Maori games? I mean, these are going to be close-run things, no?
It's very hard to know what the Maori beat Ireland in 2010, and that was a very strong Irish team because it was one of the 3 tests on tour. As such, it wasn't actually a test game, but they played us, New Zealand, then the Maori, then Australia, Saturday. This is a different Irish team. It's going to be, I would think, 4 or 5. They're not going to get debuts, but uncapped players, Joe McCarthy, James Hume, pretty much I think all the uncapped players who are not going to be probably involved on Saturday, maybe 1 or 2 on the bench. Harry Byrne could start at 10. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns there with that team, and you're coming up against a team like the Maori were really disappointing on the Lions tour in 2017. Lions it was the Lions test team, but they fairly comfortably dealt with them. They are hit and miss. It depends on kind of what group they can pull together. But I mean, some of the debutants that you've mentioned, they're full All Blacks. They're not. They might be debutants for the Maoris, but they've won 1 or 2 caps for the All Blacks. Cullen Gray, still number 8, is a very good player. Tyrell Lomax, one of the props. I mean, he could end up in the All Black picture by the end of this window. Pernara and Weber, they would probably be in the top 2 in any other country in the world, but it's an area of strength for the All Blacks. So it's a bit unknown because both teams are scratch sides. They've never played together. It's always a risk in international rugby putting unproven centres together who've never played together. Bundy Aki probably will play because he hasn't played, like the Connachtlads haven't played in months and months, in 5-6 weeks. Keane Prendergast will probably play because he hasn't, if these guys are going to contribute, they need to have a game under their belt. So Ireland need to. Wales went down in 2018 and they played the Chiefs midweek and they got absolutely hosed, and it was really damaging to them. They lost the series 3-0. They were better in the test series than they were in the midweek game, and it was damaging to Wales. They ended up making the World Cup semi-final the whole year, but for the tour point of view, it was quite a bad loss. Ireland should have more depth than Wales did at that point, and the team players will be fresh. But it's kind of 2 scratch sides. It could be scrappy, but it'll be. I think that Maori will be sent out with a mission to soften them up and kind of send out a bit of a message that this is not going to be an easy tour whatsoever.
Yeah, we think so. I saw Craig Casey was saying, and well, first of all, he made everybody feel a bit old by saying that he remembered vividly watching 10 years ago, 2012, when he was in 6th class. To which Johnny Sexton, I'm sure, went, "Would you shut your mouth?" Make him feel too old.
4 or 5 of the Irish players played in it.
Yeah, 5 were there. Yeah,
and a lot of the All Blacks, like the All Black senior core, nearly all got their debuts on that tour.
He added, though, when you're walking down the street, everyone's stopping you, wishing you well, and saying, "We're glad that you're here for the test. You see how rugby mad the country is. It's class." There was going to be hostility on the streets, like throwing vegetables at him as he walked down the street.
I think a lot of that is kind of a legacy of older tours. I found it very friendly in 17. Like on match day, they're quite vociferous. Eden Park's actually not a particularly nice atmosphere. They're quite drunk, and like a lot of rugby stadiums these days, it's quite drunk and a bit abusive. Stephen Jones was sitting quite close to me, so that's probably what it was. They don't like him at all. The Sunday Times journalists, but during the week they just want to chat rugby with you, And I think if they beat you, certainly in the old days, if they beat you, they tell you all about it. And like if O'Driscoll was spotted walking down the street, they'd make a beeline to tell him he was crap on Saturday. That's probably where it comes from. But I think that they're a lot more used to tourists now, and they quite like having. I think they're probably quite happy to have any Irish people they can get over there because they've been closed off from the world for so long. So it's just, I think this series will take on a life of its own, and maybe it gets more hostile after the first test when there's a red card or a suspension or a bad tackle, and the storylines get whipped up, and you're in that bubble. The first week is quite nice, but maybe they're killing them with kindness at the moment, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, hopefully it's a fun few weeks ahead. It's great to have it. So Rugby and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent.
I would agree with Billy Joe in terms of that there's plenty of contact going on, but this talk about something, they have to eradicate this from the game and they need to make an example. For me, all of that is rubbish. There's no point, be it the eye gouging, or be it the Melee, suddenly high horse time, let's make an example. The amount of times I've seen somebody saying or tweeting these boys need to make an example of it. The GA has to learn and stop trying to make an example. They made an example of Tyrone at the start of the year for getting involved in Melee, 4 boys sent off. All of a sudden a headlock was the worst possible thing you could do in the game. Ethan Rafferty pulled Comer down in a headlock yesterday, wasn't even dealt with at all. The sending off for Armagh, on one side you could call it as legitimate, but again there was 2 similar shoulders to heads in the Kerry game and they weren't dealt with at all. So there is so much inconsistency in the rules. Yeah. Then they go and try and make an example out of somebody. The lawyers will absolutely drive a bus through the holes in the arguments and the lack of consistency there. So unless the GA get their entire disciplinary process tightened up and fit for purpose, trying to make an example of this, it ain't going to stand up. And that's where McGeeney's coming from. Is it going to be consistent across the board? If a shoulder to the head is a sending off offence, well then it should be a sending off offence throughout the year and not on one particular incident. If a headlock is a sending off offence, then it should be a sending off offence. We've seen eye gouges before in the game. This is not the first time. Were they massively dealt with and did the suspensions hold up? I would very much doubt it. We've seen Lees constantly. Have they been maybe some suspensions, maybe not? The only big suspensions that seem to hand up are the ones that are handed down to club footballers. County footballers continually get off. So this thing about making an example about this incident, we'll wait a few weeks, it'll calm down, and there'll be another incident, we'll all jump up, this needs to be made an example of to stop it happening. It will not stop happening unless the entire disciplinary process gets made fit for purpose, which at the minute we all know it's not.
You sound thoroughly fed up.
I'm not thoroughly fed up, but the eye gouging is terrible, and we all are supposed to then come out and say how terrible it is and wring our hands in disgust at the Melee. Look, this was such a competitive game, going down the tunnel at half-time after what was an amazing game of football. Everything that happened, how Galway had to be sick the way they gifted up those goals at the end. Armagh, the comeback they showed, the resilience that they showed, it was amazing. You had 2 teams giving it absolutely everything. There's going to be a bit of pushing and shoving. That's going to happen. If we want a true spirit in our game, sometimes it's going to boil over. And yes, we need a disciplinary process fit for purpose. But there's no point jumping up and down and looking people hung for this one incident. There was probably about 80 people involved in that, and one person got stepped way over the line and has major questions, and I'm sure will have major questions to answer. But again, let that be dealt with. The issue here is that we don't have a reliable disciplinary process.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.